This is so simple, it's unbelievable. All right, this is that algorithm from the previous page right here, okay? So if we take the algorithm, go to the next slide, and we divide it up into, let's say that we have a precinct that's only 50 votes. And let's say we have a precinct that's 100 votes, and then 150 votes, then 200 votes, and then 300 votes. And let's say that this is the algorithm that they're using in every one of those precincts. Okay? Tell me about this one with 50 votes right here. What am I going to see there? It's going to be untouched, right? And the algorithm kicks in, we're starting to see a change, and a bigger change, and a bigger change, and a bigger change, right? This is what is causing the slopes. They're algorithms. Turns out in that example, if I take those precincts and I do a cumulative graphs analysis, this is what it looks like. Okay? Anybody not understand what we just went over? I know it's hard to see this from over here, but this is really, really important.
I don't understand. But that was because Benny was talking to me.
Okay, well, you're in charge, so I guess that's okay. So,
Anybody else not understand?
All right, so let's take, go ahead. Yeah.
Same small percentage of increase via the algorithm to make a much larger difference, which is why you're getting the slope.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Your check is in the mail, sir.
So let's take a look at some 2022 races. How about it? Now that you know what you're looking at, all right? Next. Well, that's actually in South Carolina at Nancy Mace. She's a rhino, okay? I won't go into detail. I'm positive this one is rigged right here, okay? And we are currently in a lawsuit with the state of South Carolina because they will not hand over the cast vote records so that we can do the analysis, okay? All right. Everyone's favorite candidate here, Liz Cheney. You know how she got 30%? She got 30% because she cheated, okay? So I don't get into who wins and who loses, all right?
Go for it.
And then this candidate, I forgot her name, Hagman, yeah. Yeah, you see what she does. You know what a negative slope means? You know what a positive slope means, right? All right, positive slope potentially means you're the benefactor of an algorithm and vice versa, okay? All right, next slide. Okay, Georgia Republican U.S. Senate, okay? Herschel Walker. Yeah, he won. He won. Look at his slope. It's for those of you that can't see it, he's got a negative slope. He loses about almost 10% cumulatively. And for people that aren't really math-oriented, what that really means, if he loses 10% cumulatively, it means that the counties and precincts over here are about 20% higher. His score is 20% higher than it is over here. Okay? And here's the Georgia Republican governor race. All right? This is Kemp. This is Purdue. Any questions? Next. North Carolina U.S. Senate, Ted Budd. He's the red line up there. He's got a negative slope. South Carolina Republican governor, Henry McMaster, negative slope. Next. Arizona Republican governor, Carrie Lake. And I told Mark Fincham about this. She won, but in the mail-in ballots, in my opinion, it was rigged against her. Not just this, a lot of other stuff we're not going to go close to covering. Texas Republican governor primary, Greg Abbott, negative slope. Next. Arkansas Republican governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, negative slope. Arkansas Republican AG, negative slope. Republican U.S. Senate, Arkansas, slightly negative slope. Next. Attorney General in Texas, that is Paxton, negative slope. South Carolina Attorney General, negative slope. Alan Wilson. Georgia Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, negative slope. Arizona U.S. Senate, Masters, negative slope. Okay. All right, sorry. All right, sorry. All right. All right. All right, sorry. Foot magnet right there. Okay. Okay. This is very interesting. This is the abortion question in Kansas. Okay. I don't have the wording, but this is whether Republicans are going to vote up here. Okay. These are by county, and what you've got here is a clear. We do expect that we're going to get less and less, but this is an absolute calculated line right here. That's what that is. I thought that was interesting.
What data do you need for that besides CVR?
I did that from the public data. I do about 90% of this just from the data that's online. Okay? It's just my way of doing it. It's what I've been doing. I only saw CVRs. All right, so everybody understand what we're looking at here. We got algorithms that are actually manifested in the publicly available data. Okay? Yes? Well, you got more, you're going from smaller to larger counties, and you know that you're getting more and more urban and, more pro-abortion type stuff. The problem is that line kicks on at a county the size 1,000 vote, okay? And it is a calculated, in my opinion, we're waiting on the CVRs to prove all this, okay? But we're having to go the legal route on all that. Yes?
I should have let you go first. Doesn't matter.
No, the elections go on as they always have, okay? We're the fly in the ointment. What changes it, if you have an idea, let us know. We're doing everything we can, okay?
Are you done?
Just about. Go forward. Yeah. Go back one. Did you go up? Yeah. All right, here's some Democrat primaries. Florida Democrat governor, Chris. It's not just that he has a positive slope. I won't go into detail, but it's a very calculated pattern when you start going up in the size of the counties, okay? This is the way they've been doing it forever. Arizona Democrat governor that's running against Kari Lake, that's Katie Hobbs. She has about a 15% gain. Next. North Carolina Democrat governor, positive slope. Florida Democrat senator, positive slope. Go on. Florida Democrat attorney general, positive slope. South Carolina governor, positive slope. The end. Thank you.
So, don't worry, that's not the last you're going to hear from Phil. I just want to make sure that we get to hear from our other two experts here, and also that you get to ask more questions, because it is important to understand these things. And also, Benny, do these graphs prove fraud, or are they indicators?
They're not proofs of fraud, but they are indicators that you should take a further look. If we look at if you guys remember Dr. Shiva, I think we got 1 million views in the first week. Just to get people to,
6 million total.
just to get, he said 6 million total, to get enough people to look at a technical video for an hour and a half long is probably monumental. But when they looked at it, we said in that analysis that we were trying to get access to more data so that we could study it further. Me and Phil actually go back. We play war games. Once I get to my portion, I'll talk about the other half of this. And we play around, and I try to hack the election to see if he can catch the signature. But we'll go through that when we talk further.
And so, talking about hacking elections, I do want to point out that at DEF CON, which is where you have these hacker conferences, they have repeatedly hacked into election machines. And it's been featured on HBO in Hacking for Democracy, and Harry Hurst-D is a famous Democrat who's done lots of films about election fraud, and J. Alex Haldeman, who is the election, sort of guru held up by the Democrats, whose recommendations that were actually written into a case in Georgia were CISA admitted. I'm sure many of you know, they put those out and admitted that those were vulnerabilities after saying there were no vulnerabilities. So it's not one side that has shown that hacking voting machines is pretty easy to do. Isn't it, Tuan?
Yep.
Allow me to have a few minutes here. Cybersecurity is a big issue right now, not only in America, but globally. I don't know if you all know that you all invite your enemy into your bedroom for a while. Your surveillance camera that you install in your bedroom or bathroom or in your house or the doorway, whatever, the data is stored in China. You have nothing stored in America's server. When you buy a camera, you think you will keep yourself safe, but you give your enemy all your identity information, including right now that China can watch us by all the surveillance camera. Name a camera that's made in America and the server in America and the cloud in America. None. Stolen election integrity is not only happen on the data. Who made the machine? Who wrote the code? Not only that, but where the machine is manufactured. Do you know that when you see all the data on the screen, all the number, is already on the 6 or 7 or 8 stage? When you start a computer or a voting machine, something have to initialize. People talking about the BIOS, if they know about technology, they talk about chipset if they know about technology, but there's something that run before the BIOS is get in. It's the EEPROM. It's very small chip. EEPROM, I promise you, a lot of people don't even know what EEPROM is, even they are engineer. The EEPROM initialize the BIOS and the chipsets and the CPU. The EEPROM is will call the network to open the gateway. My name is Tuan Lee. I'm not only a cybersecurity expert, but I'm also a congressional candidate for 2022, and I lost. Because the voting system and the corruption from the government and the buddy system and the rhino. I have all the evidence. That's why I did not file for foreign election, because everybody filed for foreign election, but nothing happened. I'm the one who take the action. I'm going to do something, because I want the 2024 and the future vote election will be better. Now, I will talk more about that later on the panel. My background, I'm an cybersecurity business entrepreneur. I run for Congress in the Democrat area, which is Orlando, have 65% Democrat. They don't want me to win on the primary. And the rhino don't want me to win the primary because they know that I anti-communism. And they know that my first thing in my agenda is stop China stealing, that they are stealing our personal identity. We have to stop all the thing from outsider. We have to make something. Hello, you hear me now? Okay. So cybersecurity is my another topic on my platform. Stop the corruption from the government. Yes. Term limit. Cybersecurity is a big threat to American, and manufacturers have to bring it back to America, because our enemy control our technology, control our inventory, and control everything we say. So we will talk about it more. That's what I'm here. That's what I'm here for today.
Thank you, Tuan. Well, thank you very much. And Tuan is from Vietnam, those of you know, who have their own history of communism. Okay, so Benny. Yeah, let's go.
I'll make it really brief. I bring you guys greetings from the bottom of the rabbit hole. I've been at the bottom of the rabbit hole. I'm not going to talk about myself. I have a site, www.bennie, Benny, don't why me, BennySmith.com. If you go to the elections section, there's a walk all the way through the rabbit hole. And I sought to do that because if you heard Laura talk about hacking democracy, Bev Harris has to be one of the greatest pioneers in election integrity, and she has gifted blackboxvoting.org to me. I was the last project that she did, and we call that project Fraction Magic. A show of hands, or somebody, has anybody heard of Fraction Magic? Yes. All right, you guys who have your hands in the air, you're at the bottom of the rabbit holes. You guys who don't have your hands up, you're at the top of the rabbit hole or somewhere in the middle. When you get down to the bottom, the algorithm, right, is something that I found out, and I called it Fraction Magic because I built it, and that's what I named it. So Clint did it in the early 2000s. 16 years later, I did it again in 2016. And if you guys look at a video, it was taboo to talk about election fraud and that you could game an election system. But I wrote a program using actual election software to change the results. And I do it on camera all the time. There are a bunch of videos there. I even did it in a Senate briefing room where I take software and I let people from the audience pick who the winner is going to be. So that is all on that site. Bev Harris, she did that research along with me. I reached out to her, and we coined that term Fraction Magic because it's a feature. It is not a bug. It's actually placed in there. It's called a weighted election, so it has a name. I think you guys refer to it affectionately as hammer and scork. Yeah. Same thing. So I wear two hats because I'm a technical computer programmer, but I'm also a appointed election official. I'm the secretary of the election commission in my county. So when I got involved, I wanted to do something about it, so I joined my local election commission. So when people get elected, my signature goes at the bottom of their certificate. So I know what it's like in theory and also in practice. So I wanted to allot most of the time so that the public could ask any of the questions. Thank God you guys are here, but I'll give you guys a tip from a guy named O'Neill. All politics is local. Y'all see what I did there?
So Bev was a Democrat, right? Yeah. And you're a Democrat too. And if you read Black Box Voting, it's littered with examples. And you know, since we're in Florida, it's worth mentioning that this is where the Sequoia hanging Chad election happened, right? And at the time, we just thought it was about hanging Chads. But when you actually look at it, and Dan Rather did a lot of reporting on this at CBS, that was the moment when we were convinced that machines were the only way to go, right? And so there's been a lot of reporting and a lot of evidence has surfaced since then, and there are a number of people who believe that that was on purpose, right? Because voting has gone from manual to electronic, right, to mechanical to electronic to digital. That's the 4 stages of voting. But that 2000 election was really a game changer in terms of the machines, because after that is when America went to electronic voting and then to digital. So if we want to open up the floor to questions, you've heard enough from me. There's a gentleman there who's first to raise his hand.
So I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. It's very topical right now based on what you're saying. So with a small group, and we obtained the actual official CITL election results for about 40-some states. It took 20 minutes looking at them to see that an algorithm would grab the total vote percentage and start applying it to the individual vote count percentages. So they would hold the vote in place and they would inject high percentage counts for Biden, especially in the swing states, to solely swing it in his favor. It happened in Florida too.
It doesn't matter. You can have a video of a guy flipping the switch, and it doesn't matter, and hasn't mattered since I wrote the stupid thing, and forever. They basically just ignore it. They will ignore it. It doesn't matter what your evidence is. They'll call it crazy. They won't do it. In 2004, the first one when I actually noticed it was going crazy, Bush won Arizona, but all the polling said he lost. Exit polls, they did a polling after the election, which usually gives a bounce to the guy who won, right? Because everybody wants to change. Except there he lost to men and to women, but yet he won the state. So you have to wonder which sex voted for him, right? And it's been that way the whole time. It's been that way for 20 years. So instead of pushing on, we have the evidence, because they're never going to accept it. They're just not going to do it. And I just got done working on a case in Colorado with the lady on the screen a second ago. In her case, after 2004, the Colorado legislature changed the law that said in a recount, you will take a sample of the ballots, actual ballots, and you will recount them. And they did some test ballots. They just marked something up, sent it through, and it was fine. Completely not legal. So far, every case she's filed has been thrown out as moot. Not important, we did it our way, we're good. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's no penalty for doing it wrong. If the supervisor of election steals your election, there is no penalty for doing it wrong. None whatsoever. Yes, sir.
So, everything we're supposed to, and we're all here doing this, they're going to flip it and say, doesn't matter. How do you change it?
We got solutions. We're going to get to that one. We got solutions. I want to address this.
Wait, let him finish. Do you want to?
Sure, real quick. You get rid of the machines. You get everybody to say, we're not going to use these anymore. Hand count, paper ballots, precinct level with a video. Video is free for everyone to see. And you can't sell it to your officials as I have irrefutable proof that is wrong. You have to sell it as we don't trust it. And if we don't trust it, you're going to get January 6th on steroids, because people will not accept it forever. They've accepted a lot longer than I thought they would, but what do I know?
So I wanted to finish.
So you can film the count and send the film straight to China, right? Manny, tell us.
I want to
the
finish the
solutions.
second half of this guy's question, because he talked about fraction magic. I gave you guys a tip, and it's going to be the theme. What was the tip? All politics is local. Right. The local election officials who are running these local elections, they are usually good people. I'm an election official. These people are not a part of some larger scheme, right? If you look at government, they are the largest employers in many of these counties. So the people who are conducting these elections, you're talking about your alderman, your school board, your county commissioner, your mayor. So that is what they are looking at. They are not looking at a race at a top ticket for the larger level, because they're beholden to their counties. So they're not necessarily looking at the presidential race at all. And to Clint's point, once you get to certification, their job is to adjudicate and certify. They're not looking at the top ticket. They're looking at these local races, and they got probably 10 or 15. We just had an election in August. I signed 93 certificates. There were 93 elections in one election cycle. So they're not looking at some top race. They're looking at these local ones. So it's really hard, and the laws are basically set up in such a way that it's almost impossible to challenge the election. That's why Tim Canova is the reason why I'm here. He's a guy of tremendous courage. He was crazy enough to sue and go after and pursue an authenticatable result. We need more people to do that, but when we get to the solutions, there are many laws that are on the books that we can use now. The public records laws, requesting the paper ballots. There's a term that I didn't hear used much until the lady on the Zoom used it. Ballot images. If you don't know what they are, that is something that you need to study. The paper ballot goes into a machine and it takes a selfie. And that selfie is a digital record. That's what the machine counts, not the paper ballot. The paper ballot is a trash bin somewhere. Those become public records, and Mark Fincham alluded to it. The clause that he gave is a federal statute that basically summarizes, it says, records created in connection to a federal election must be preserved for 22 months. And what we are finding in these lawsuits and a lot of these organizations that I work with nationally, they're deleting the ballot images. They're destroying them because they can publish those online. And you can go recount the election using the images. You can get all that on the thumb drive. So there is a reason why the connection to these pieces are not being assembled, and that keeps enough confusion where you can keep winning elections the way you can keep having selections instead of elections.
Can I continue with what he had, because I have experience with that. I run for 2022, so I has not only experience in technology, but I also have experience now as a candidate. So what happened is, on the election days, I received a phone call start from 7:30 until 6 p.m. People calling me. The reason is they calling me because this has never happened before. You won't hear it from other candidates, because typical American, they all speak English. But because I'm one of the Asian guy or Vietnamese guy try to run in a Republican, so I get Vietnamese supporter, even a mega China support me. And when they have problem, they don't know what to do. So they call me because they don't know how to look up the number. They don't know who to get in touch. So they call me. I have to answer my phone from 7:30 to 6 p.m. because they have problem after our problem. Now, let me point some simple stuff. I have a lot of story. I mean, if you give me 10 hours, I can make it happen too. But, but the same guy, I registered for him, not register, update for him is a Republican. Because he don't know that he's Democrat. He said, I don't know why. Forget about it. Now, he went to the poll. He said, I'm not trust the paper, mail, and stuff like that. He came to the poll. And then it print out without my name on it. It print out without my name on it. And he called me. He said, how come I don't see your name? And I say, well, what district you are in? And he say, well, I'm in District 10. So you should see my name on it. And I asked him, okay, can you take a picture, send me what the ballot look like? He sent it to me. I have it on my phone too. It's a Democrat ballot. Now, he tried to talk. He went outside because they don't let him talk on the phone. He went outside, and then he talked to me. And I say, well, go back inside. And they say, when he go back inside, they say, well, you Democrat. He come back outside, say 20. They still say that I'm a Democrat. And I tell them, tell the guy, show you the computer that they enter your name. And when he look at what they enter, it's come out Republican. Now, one more case, and I will talk about technology stuff. Another case is there's a family, they are Republican. They know for sure, and I know them, they are Republican, a family of 6 people. They are Republican. But somehow, they get Democrat. Now, they asked me like the month before the election to update. So I go ahead, get the whole family update. 2 weeks before the election, the voting car came to his house, and he don't even call me. Came to his house, and he look at it and say, one is say non-party, the other say is Democrat. I updated, right. But they still see is a non-party Republican. The voting card sent to their house. It's happened that night is the last night before I send all the my postcard out, and he called me and say, hey, anything I can help? I say, well, we're almost done here. So I mean, that's 1 o'clock in the morning. So, and then he say, well, Tuan, I'm sorry, but I cannot vote for you. I say, what happened? And he say, well, our entire family received last 2 weeks that we didn't want to bother you because it's too late to update. But we received 6 cars. None of the cars say Republican. And I say, wait a minute. I did update for you. And I went to the computer and looked up his information. When I look up his information, I say, your whole entire family is a Republican. What are you talking about? So they play game on any way that they can. It's not only about a machine. Now, talking about a machine, it's easy to create a virus or an error on a code and a clean and good code if you're a software engineer. Algorithm and if then, that can change the whole thing. So they can start with a nice kick in. Okay, start to collect in after certain percent. Now, if this percent happen, then pick this, put on this. So to create a code, something like that on the machine is so easy. It's not complicated at all, because for people who don't understand the coding behind this, they think it's complicated, but to create some code algorithm that's to put the vote on somebody else is so easy. On top of that, if China and the people who involved in China, they work on the machine, and they open the door, open the gateway to bridge the network. Only 30 seconds. You don't have an hour. You don't need to have an hour. The machine just restart. The algorithm go in and start another set of code. It's not a big deal. So put it this way, like what he say, you scan the machine, you scan the paper palette in, the machine can have algorithm to do whatever they want. But when I say that after I lost, by the way, I run in second place, only 2 months and 27 days of running for Congress in District 10. So I'm running second place. But if you look at second place and the first place, there's a big gap. And everyone who run in my race, they all run before, or they have 20, 30 years of politician. And I run in second place. Now, it's clearly to me that the Democrat, they don't want me to win because they know if I win, voting system will be audited. They know my cybersecurity background. And they know that I want to bring the manufacturer back to America. That's why the buddy system and Rhino, they don't want that to happen because there's money. And I am nobody, and they don't want the guy go in and stir the pot. So you better let him lost the election. But they try hard, but I'm still in second place. So now think of this way. When I'm sitting here after I lost the election, I'm thinking a solution how to fix a problem. We have to move forward. I know you want to go to paper palette. I mean, I support that too. But the truth is, I'm not gonna bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna BS. I'm not bullshit. The truth is, it's hard for us to go completely paper. We have to use a machine somehow. So we have to fix the problem. We have to have a solution to get it happen. So we have to make things happen now because we already too late. Look at that. It's happened in 2012. Maybe before that too. It's not something yesterday. So that's why, Benny, we think if we all getting together, we work on the system, we get a solution. I have a solution, but I don't want to say in the public because the Democrat will get an idea. I get a solution for that.
I have a solution. Stop talking.
Okay.
Okay. I know we're running behind schedule, but we still have more questions, and we do still have more experts coming up. So, last two questions.
Mine's real small. I just want to know why he invented that program to begin with.
Why'd you do it, Kurt?
It's all your fault.
Because I was a programmer, and we do that all the time.
Were you asked specifically to do that to change the election votes? I mean,
No, I thought we were doing it to prevent it, because you got to remember that electronic machines weren't running then. So I thought it was, well, they're going to have electronic machines, those evil Democrats, because the Republican time, so you always have the other side, right? Those evil Democrats were going to put that out there. Would it work? You can never, we differ on the part that he thinks we need a machine. You can never secure the machine from the programmer. Impossible. If I put something in there, it's in there. If I get a ballot images are not magic. I make the ballot image, which means I can make it anything I want to. I can make it right, I can make it wrong, I can make it pink, I can make it whatever I want to. I own everything in the machine, I own anything in that universe. So you can't have machines touch anything unless you can trust the programmer. Never trust the programmer.
Okay, Benny.
Yes.
It's more than a formula,
The
man.
PowerPoint? Yeah.
It's a lot more than a formula.
Talk to me after we get off here. Yeah.
Benny,
Did
did
you
you
bring
wanna-
your checkbook?
Onto that, right?
Yeah, I did.
Wait,
Okay.
okay, wait, hold on, hold
I
on.
want
Dave's gonna
Chief-
finish answering the last question.
Yeah, so there are solutions. Many of the laws are already on the books. We need to know about chain of custody. There are many things that are on the books that keep safeguards. And I always put it like this. I don't have a lock on my house because I don't trust my neighbor. I have a lock on there so I don't have to. Right? I'm not calling my neighbor a thief because I'll put a lock on my house. I don't have to worry about if he's a thief or not, right? So we actually have laws that are on the books that are enforceable. What we don't have is the transparency in the execution of that. So we need transparency. If you're going to have some machinery at some point based on the laws that are here now to count the ballots. And if you have a paper ballot and a ballot image, those two are not mutually exclusive. They are a marriage. They are a pair. So what Tim did, and Tim was one of the first people, the first election integrity panel that was here was Tim Canova's, and I was on that panel in 2018. You have the paper ballot, which is the irrefutable, that is prima facie evidence in the legislature. That's an irrefutable piece of evidence, right? I don't want confidence. I write code. You give me no confidence. Give me some evidence. That is evidence. Your hand and eye coordination was all you needed to make your selections. Once you have that, it goes through the technological piece, which is a digital scanner. That digital scanner now creates a pair, and that image can be original, right? And that's what Tim tried to do. He first asked, he didn't tell the whole story, first asked for the images. They said, we don't have them. Then they came up with some images. Then he said, now I want to compare them to the originals. And that was not going to work. So it catches those layers, right? So if I could have it my way, hand-marked paper ballots counted in public at gunpoint, right? Like but that's not going to happen that way, right? But if you could lock down the process and make people who are transporting this stuff be under oath, I think the sheriff should be one transporting the information, not necessarily. They have a higher standard that they have to live by. And if you enforce the chain of custodies, you can make this work with what is existing now. And as a spoiler alert, a lot of this election equipment is made to be audited. They, like Dominion says, they have the audit mark. It's like an audit suite. Yeah, but it's configurable. And I can do whatever I want to with it. So they need to remove all those configurations and enforce policy. And then we could get an authenticatable result.
Thank you, Benny. Okay, I'm sure some of you have a question for Phil. Okay, the lady in red.
So I'm going to put my election commissioner hat on and fill this one. It's really hard to apply that at the state level. The EAC is based on 2006 guidelines, so it's already out to date. Just imagine that computers age in dog years mixed with jet fuel, right? Like your computer, like the iPhone 1 and next year, the iPhone 14 next year is going to be obsolete. So you're not going to be able to certify your way out of this. The state of Tennessee is where I reside, and we haven't certified in 20 years. We never certified in 20 years, so you have to have your secretaries of state to be willing to enforce those, and most of the times they don't even report to they're not even accountable to like the attorney general. So there are lots of state laws that make that really complicated to apply. However, the solutions are still amenable if you apply the chain of custody. That is a place where people need to look. If you're enforcing where these paper ballots go, where the machines are, how they are transported, how they are authenticated, how they're tested, and that's all public knowledge where any person can go and look at that information. It's a lot harder to do anything bad.
Also, they're guidelines,
Yeah,
right?
they're just guidelines.
They're guidelines, they're not laws, and that's never changed. Phil wants to say something.
Thank you. One thing, I missed one punchline in my presentation. Remember all of the Republican graphs near the end that I put up, and they all had a negative slope. They're Republicans. They have one thing in common. Did anybody figure it out when I was naming what the races were? They have one thing in common. They're all endorsed by Trump.
Okay, this is the last question. I know there's lots of people who want questions. Did you want to say something? Clint?
I wanted to address the audits and the certification and why that just doesn't work. If you look at 2004, they did an audit of actually a hand count, paper ballots in the 2004 election. And the supervisor election and their staff were so excited that they pre-counted the ballots so that they could do a correct one. A couple of them went to jail, but you just can't trust people to do this. It has to be something that can be verified by everybody in this room, because people cheat. When you go into a certification, anyone know anything about the Volkswagen case? No? Volkswagen made a little Rabbit. It was a diesel, great car, got great mileage, and almost no emissions, right? Every time they tested it was great. Except then these college students who weren't following the rules actually took it out and tested in the field and found out that Volkswagen had cheated it, so it knew when it was being tested and when it wasn't. And when it was being tested, it was throwing it out like a factory, right? So it wouldn't pass emissions. So Volkswagen ended up having to recall, I don't know how many there were.
Every car they made.
Every car they made of that thing had to recall. But the machines know what's going on. So if we leave machines in the system, then we're going to have people who are honest that are constantly trying to compete with the people who are not honest, who have control of the machines. And they will lose. I guarantee you they'll lose. Because whatever they figure out, we'll beat them.
Can I, per your concern, I'm not agree I'm not support the machine, but the problem we have right now and think something that we cannot move forward or we cannot move back, I'm just say the truth. Yes, I love it to have the paper ballot, but we have problem too, like what I mentioned earlier, that the people, it's not about who gonna vote, it's about who count the vote, if you remember who say that.
Stalin.
So the problem is the person can go into the election day and give the driver license, but who is the one who put the data out in and where they get a paper, and then how they switch it out, because everything can be under the desk. You give me something, I put it here and come back with something else. So it's about the people too. It's not only about the machine. We can go to paper, but we have problem everywhere. That's why we have to get a solution for every scenario, from the person count them to the machine. Because do you think the Democrat, they want to switch everything to paper count? No, they don't. They will fight for it because that's the best way for them to cheat. So that's why I'm saying I'm not like support the machine, but we have to get solution for every scenario.
Okay, so we have more experts coming up. Mark Cook is one of them. He's got a lot of ideas on this and how we can solve it. I know you have more questions, and I'm sorry because I know it's frustrating when you want to ask. These gentlemen, well, I don't know if you catch them. They may not be going anywhere. You might have a chance. I know, Phil, people have a lot of interest in your presentation, and I know you're willing to make that available, and I'm sure people would love to talk to you. So we're going to bring on the next panel because otherwise we'll never get out of here. So, you know, and one of the things with Kurt is he's been through all of this. He's tried literally everything under the sun. So he's reached this position because he thought every time that it was exposed that people would do something about it. And you know what happened? They changed the law and made it legal. Right? You ask him about that. And then they do, you know, films and hit pieces, and they discredit you and so on and so on. Okay, so does anybody need to stand up, stretch, pee if you need to? Okay. Where's our next panel? Are you ready to come up? So we were going to have a presentation by Tom Homan, and as I mentioned, the ACLU tied him up. And so to address this issue of the border and how this plays into elections, we have another special guest, actually. One of my favorite people as well is Jason Jones. And for those of you who don't know Jason, he is a retired captain in the Texas Department of Public Safety. He has, for more than 25 years, been documenting the transformation of the Mexican cartels from drug organizations to the most powerful. Hey, just because you don't have to, shh. You're lucky to have somebody like Jason here, okay? So out of respect, I really want you to understand this is one of the greatest people I have ever known. Jason has extraordinary integrity. He's been a lawman since his early 20s. He gave up everything to travel the length and breadth of this country because he thought the problem has to be that they just don't know. They just don't know that the people that used to bring a bit of marijuana in so Americans could get stoned at a college party have become the most violent and powerful criminal organizations on the face of the earth. Sinaloa cartel, what, 54 countries, Jason? CJNG was 48, now they're more than 50. More than 50. Right? Yep. And right now, the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, is busy taking over every plaza on the Texas border, south of the Texas border. And nobody has more up-to-date information about this than Jason Jones. Nobody. He's down there almost every day for Newsmax. He's given up everything. He just got his home back for the first time in years, right? I mean, when I say people have given up a lot, Clint Curtis, he hasn't had a break since he identified this issue. You can find the video of him online testifying before Maxine Waters and a whole bunch of other Democrats saying exactly the same thing that everybody is saying today. The same things they said in 2016 on the other side of the aisle. And so why and how? What does the border have to do with elections? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Is that if your voter registration, like Eric, don't want to know what's the #1 rule at Eric, you cannot ask for someone's citizenship status. Why not? Why not? Because once you're entered into that voter database, show up at the polls, electronic poll book, oh yeah, there you are. Don't know whether you're legal or not legal, right? No voter ID. So how does this matter? Well, go back to the census. More than 10 years ago, what did they take out of the census? Citizenship. So let's take the state of California, because they're a great place to look at as a model for what goes to the rest of the country, right? And when it comes to election integrity and fraud, California really is doing a remarkable job of being a shining example on fraud for the whole country, right? Why do I say that? Well, what happens when the census boosts your population figures? What happens? More seats in Congress. More seats in Congress. Can you think of anything more important than that? Okay, so you have more seats in Congress, plus, what else do you get? More federal dollars, right? More federal tax dollars for your people. Never mind, and I know, and Jason knows, we're talking about half the time the people coming across the border now, it's no longer what it was 10, 15 years ago. You're not getting people from Mexico City coming to make a better life. You're getting people from villages in the rural areas of Guatemala who do not habla español. They've never spoken a word of Spanish in their life. They speak a local indigenous tribal language. Right? That a lot of time. You think those people are coming over, know about their rights? No, they don't know about their rights. They're not showing up at the polls and voting illegally. No. Somebody else is doing it in their name. Somebody else is using and exploiting them, the same way the cartels are using and exploiting them as they traffic them across the southern border. So that's how it relates. There's many other ways, but that's just one way that it relates to the elections. And I've talked enough. I want to ask Jason to give you a brief introduction to what he has seen. He's down there all the time, and if you want to see him, you can see him on Newsmax. You can follow him on Tripwires and Triggers. He's been kicked off Twitter. The tick and the talk. You can find them on the tick and the talk, as Jason likes to say, because we're old and we know it.
Lara, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate you more than you know. Ladies and gentlemen, how's my volume in the back? Can everybody hear me okay? Good volume? Fantastic. Good afternoon. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And I know what you're thinking. How is it that this border is directly impacting me and my family when you're here to hear about voter fraud? Ladies and gentlemen, what you are witnessing at the southwest border right now and in Mexico is the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. I want to stress this again to you. What you are really witnessing is the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. And I know that as soon as I said that, some of you said, well, hang on a second. This is by design. And if you thought that, I want you to remember one thing. That's because you look at the border through the lens of immigration, because that's what most of the media has shown you. You see, it's very difficult to understand the trade craft that we are up against with the Mexican cartels and the alien smuggling organizations and what we call the Halcon network, the lookouts, the Falcons, who operate along your border. Because media mostly goes to your border and they show you what? Large numbers of people voluntarily walking across that border, it appears, walking up to the U.S. law enforcement and then turning themselves in. And you see it through that lens because that's what media mostly shows you. What we, Lara and I, have been doing for years now, and thanks to her work, the nation would not realize what we are up against with these cartels if she had not been willing to do what she is doing. Because I can tell you, I was at it for 3 years with the state police before she was willing to come down, sit on the side of that border, and watch an hour-and-a-half-long gun battle between Cartel del Noreste, known as CDN, one of the most hyper-violent cartels in Mexico, and Cartel de Golfo that lasted about an hour and a half. 50 caliber belt-fed machine guns, 40 millimeter grenades, armored vehicles going off. And for the first time on national news, everything that I had been warning was coming to America was finally able to be seen. So thank you for that, as I always tell you. Thank you very much, Larry.
It's at 4 in the morning. I was a little grumpy.
So where are we right now, and how does it impact you and your families? Because this is the real issue. Right now, in the last 10 months at your southwest border, there have been 1.9 million apprehensions by the United States Customs and Border Protection. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the CBP website. You can look at the data. In addition, 800,000 gotaways. What is a gotaway? A gotaway is a term that U.S. Customs and Border Protection has for people who they know made it into the country illegally between the ports of entry, meaning an agent saw someone visually, a sensor picked them up, or they read sign in the ground. Border Patrol reads sign, tracking people very well. That's a stat. They count that. That is not made public to you. It is leaked to us, and we get it to you every single month so that the American people really know what is getting through. So when we look in the last 2 years under the Biden-Harris administration, you are looking at 4.9 million people known to have got across that border into the United States. Never mind the unknowns. Now that is the immigration layer. That is an easy fix, believe it or not. And I know it is the one that is on many of your minds and many Americans as you watch what's coming across your screens night after night, day after day. But listen to me when I tell you this as an old lawman and as somebody that has been on the ground trying to illuminate this problem. The immigration issue is absolutely fixable. We know what that is. It is enforce our laws, have the MPP program, the Migration Protection Protocols, have our border wall. We know it works. We don't think it. And you tell the world that if you come, you will be apprehended and you will be taken back home, and it will shut this down. Because I can tell you when I'm down there and I'm talking to these folks, and I ask them, why are you here? Why are you coming? Because what you have not been told is that the alien smuggling organizations, the Mexican cartels, and what we call the long-haul smugglers on social media all over the world are saying, if you want to go to the United States of America, now is your time. and they have heard the call, and then what they do is they call back home for those that have made it across. Another thing that most Americans are not told, as Larry can tell you, when they're crossing, many of them have iPhones. And then they call back home and they say they're not lying. And now this tidal wave continues to grow and grow from all over the world. And that's why last year what we saw was a tectonic shift in three main areas. First and foremost, we watched as the cartels went from human smuggling to human trafficking of people through debt bondage. I've been working that border, ladies and gentlemen, since 1999. I had never seen that occur like what we're seeing right now. So much to the point that Cartel de Golfo, known as CDG, one of the most hyper-violent cartels that controls everything across from us in Matamoros all the way to Miguel Alemán, they're actually putting wristbands on men, women, and children. I broke that story last year. And yet, do you hear anything about it very often if you don't watch Newsmax? But yet, every night you can watch that take place. Let me give you some numbers here.
Tell them what the wristbands do, Jason.
Sure. The wristbands. Good, good. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. What the wristbands represent to the cartels, ladies and gentlemen, is a process. And that is that anyone that crosses through their territory, which is what they battle for, puts a wristband on a man, a woman, or a child so that they know who they are and whether they pay what is known as the piso or the tax. In 2014, that piso in tax was about $100 to cross the river. Nobody cared. The cartels really didn't care. They made their money from alien smuggling groups that work under them, but to them, it was just people, they use it, and then they would move drugs around them. Today, that has absolutely changed. Today, what it is all about is making sure that they make money off these people, but also are able to keep track of them as this virus is now being transported by our government through the country. And let me explain how. When they enter the stash houses on the Mexico side, the cartel then takes all of their known, what we call PII data, personal identifying information. They write this down, and then they put one of these wristbands on them, and these wristbands actually have a code on a number. That number goes into the cartel's database, where they can then keep track of these folks by name, but also in that database where they said they were going, their cell phone number, but also their country of origin and their family, because many times they're picking up the phone and validating who they are and who their family is. This is how they keep them under debt bondage.
And very often taking titles for their land back home and for their homes. I mean, impoverishing their families back home even more.
And the fees are extraordinary. What was once in 2014 about $100 to cross that river is now $2,500 on average, just if you're a Mexican citizen. That's just to cross the river. That has nothing to do with your trip across the world, throughout Central America, or through Mexico. If you're Central American, it's about $3,000. If you are Chinese, $5,000, and if you're Russian or Middle Eastern, $9,000. They don't have the money, most of them. Some sell everything they have, their homes, and they pay up front, but most do not. So now they cross into this country. They're being sent throughout, but yet they are indebted. Think of this for a second. Indebted to a criminal organization that should be a terrorist organization in a foreign country for years, if not decades to come. Second, the other shift that we saw was the doubling down of fentanyl. As the cartels realized that this was real.
Does everybody know what fentanyl is?
Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that chemical precursors come in from China, which is what your government tells you, but what they don't tell you is how the cartel, specifically the Sinaloans, and also Cartel Jalisco New Generation, are already working with India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan to import those chemical precursors so that when we do finally start working to stop the Chinese precursors, they've already ahead of the game. And they've been doing that for about 2 years now, just so you know.
And just to recap, fentanyl was created by a Belgian pharmacist in the 1960s. It was typically a drug that is, and is still used in hospitals in surgery because it's a very quick high and it's a dramatic drop. How did it get introduced as a street drug? It has never been a street drug before. The world has never seen a drug like fentanyl. Okay, there is no comparison in history for this narcotic. because it's pharmaceutical. So it's created in a lab. They got the analogs and how to make it where? Because we outsourced our manufacturing capabilities to China to make a small number of people really rich. That's what we did. They lied to us about globalization. They don't talk about all the towns across the Midwest, all the manufacturing towns in flyover country that went bankrupt, right? They don't want to talk about that. We don't care about that. Isn't that a bunch of racist rednecks? We hope those white kids die, right? We don't care about them. And the future of America is diverse, people. Get with the program. 70% of the population of this country is still white, by the way. 70%. Just think about that. And so what they did, the Chinese introduced fentanyl as a street drug in 2011 and 12. They did it by sending over in the mail just a few grains because it's that powerful, right? And then what Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party did, they used their relationships built up over a long period of time with the cartels, and they used their pharmacists and their chemists, and they trained the cartels in how to make it. They gave them the precursor chemicals they shipped out from China, the pill presses, the dyes, you know, when you get a pill and it's got a little number on it. You know, when your kid thinks they're buying an Adderall, right, because they got to study for exams, or they take a Xanax because that's what we do with kids now. We don't teach them life skills. Social media tells them, you have anxiety, you have depression, you have panic attacks, you need a pill, right? You need to go to a therapist who's going to tell you to change your gender, give you a problem you can't fix. Oh, by the way, your skin's white, you're screwed, right? You're a racist for the rest of your life. Take a pill. And then what they do, the cartels, they throw baby powder in the blender. I've seen the blenders, and they throw fentanyl in there, and it takes a few grains for a child to overdose. DEA, they're committing, you've got agents, the suicide rates are through the roof, the resignations are through the roof. Why? Because they signed up to fight the cartels. And what are they doing? Taking the bodies of children out of the homes of American parents all across this country every single day. And you never hear about it. By the time Trump went to Davos and asked Xi Jinping to ban the sale of fentanyl, the Chinese were laughing at us. Laughing. Because they had already outsourced everything to the Mexican cartels. And fentanyl labs, you can have a big high-rise in Cabo or wherever, right? And they've got labs in the apartments, and that's private property. Good luck. It's no longer the DEA flying over looking at the marijuana crops or the poppies or whatever, estimating. No, the cartels now control around 85 to 90% of the global trade in narcotics. What does every street gang in the world trade in? Narcotics. That means the Mexican cartels control almost all of the street gangs on every town and every city all across the world. And that's just one part of their business, just one. And the man who has documented the transformation of these cartels for more than 20 years, who can tell you the day they started using armored vehicles, the generation of armored vehicle, where they were manufactured, what the weaknesses were. He has been screaming about this. He's been telling anyone who will listen. And why he says it's an intelligence failure. Failure suggests somebody just failed, and it's sort of like a tragedy, right? What he means is our intelligence agencies have failed us because they haven't been honest. They haven't been honest, and that applies across the board.
She's absolutely right, ladies and gentlemen. The CDC has now said that in 2021, we have lost 107,622 of our fellow citizens to overdoses in this country. Of those, over 93,000 directly linked to synthetic fentanyl. So you're talking about fentanyl and methamphetamine. But think of that for a second. Now, let me put this in perspective. Where were we in the 80s? And I know many of you remember the crack epidemic that we went through in this country, right? We were only averaging about 10,000 overdoses a year during that time frame. And when you put it up and you look at it visually in a chart, it is stunning. The arc from when we first began to see fentanyl crossing the southwest border was 2015. And it was 70 pounds according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. From then on, every year after, you can see that arc go straight up. And yet, What have we done to stop it? Where we are right now is we cannot arrest or seize our way out of this problem domestically. Look at some of the seizures that you have been seeing recently. Over 1 million pills at a time being seized. Last week, Albuquerque, that was a major tripwire because in that seizure, you had 1 million pills of fentanyl, you had 142 pounds of methamphetamine, you had $4 million in U.S. currency. And who was it, Lara? It wasn't the cartels. It was a Serrano street gang along with Mexican Mafia. And it was a month-long investigation where they ordered it up from the Sinaloans and brought it in. Now, if there are any former law enforcement or military, you know that that's usually about a 2 to 3 year investigation with a bust out. And instead, in 1 month, they ordered that much up. Who's responsible? The Sinaloans. And they have also, specifically the Los Chapitos, the sons of Chapo Guzman. The candy fentanyl that you're now hearing about, have many of you heard about this candy fentanyl? Rainbow, as they're also calling it, or the Skittles on the street, as they call it. That fentanyl is directly coming from the Los Chapitos. That's where it started. And it was a strategic decision, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration and guys that I have known for many, many years, to make that change and to directly target our youth. We broke that story about 2 weeks ago, exactly who was responsible and exactly what their mission was behind it. Second, when you look at it under a microscope in a lab, what they're finding is it's a regular fentanyl pill, but in the very last part of the process, it shows dye. That's it. There is no difference. But in the underworld, people who are addicted to fentanyl, they'll say, we like the pink ones better. They'll say, we like the blue ones better. That's a common thing. In the old days when I was working methamphetamine in Houston, Texas with the meth squad, I remember we used to have a source, she used to say, Jason, I really like the pink methamphetamine. What did she mean? Well, what she didn't realize is in the cooking process, if you don't clean out the red phosphorus and you don't filter it out, it leaves a pink film. And what she was getting more of was red phosphorus. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the stuff that's on the end of matchsticks when you light it up, because that's what's in the process of making methamphetamine under the hot or cold method. But here's where I'm going with this. What is happening in Mexico is a national security problem. And while we look at it through the lens of immigration, you have to remember all the other layers that are happening. The fentanyl overdose death crisis. The murders now happening on the U.S. side. You know, when the cartels first began committing mass killings in Mexico, I was a captain in the Texas Rangers Border Security Operations Center, and I'm screaming. We had 72 murders in San Fernando, just south of Matamoros, Mexico, right near our border. And at that point, we had been having these gun battles that were raging hours and using all types of military-grade weaponry. And I'm screaming at my leadership, and I'm screaming at the U.S. intelligence agencies, and I'm saying, we have got to act, and they would always say the same thing. Jason, as long as that stays in Mexico, it's not our problem. And then in Allende, 300 men, women, and children killed, chopped into pieces, then guisoed. Guiso, ladies and gentlemen, is where they cook the body, because the cartels will tell you, you can't count a body that doesn't exist. And that's why in Mexico right now, what is also not being discussed is that that country has lost 310,000 people in the violence in Mexico. They are suffering at an unprecedented level. They also suffer from a massive drug problem. But these cartels today in Mexico are a true parallel government. If we were sitting down right now, just like we are, and we were talking to some of these cartel leaders, and Lara has done this with me. She's talked to and debriefed Zeta boss out of Austin, Texas. And when you sit across from them and you ask them, what is the difference between the Mexican government and the cartels? Nothing. What they will tell you is yes. And you say, no, what's the difference? No, Jason, they're one and the same. And that's absolutely correct. They call the cartels the company. And ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about border security, you need to know that there is not one state, there is not one city, and there's not one county in this country that has not been impacted. The problem is you have not been clearly told about what is coming. But there are solutions. Next week, one of those is going to be announced across the country. And we are going to, the first time, we are putting it in writing. For 5.5 years, I've been trying to get these cartels designated as foreign terrorist organizations, and I have spoke to anyone that would listen about what we need to do to fix this problem, because there are many that think that this is unfixable. The immigration layer, I promise you, that's an easy fix. We know exactly what needs to be done, where the challenge will come for this nation moving forward, and it will come because there is no getting around it. These cartels will not stop. They can't stop. They can't even control themselves anymore. Legacy in the old days where you had a traditional capo boss who controlled what was happening has really ended because we are fighting dark networks. When you think of the Sinaloans, that's a great example. You hear about Chapo Guzman, you hear about Almayo, but the truth is they're broke up into multiple cells. So by getting the cartel designated as foreign terrorist organizations, that allows us to go after them globally by limiting their mobility first and foremost, because if you're a terrorist, you can't travel across the world legally. Second, you hear about from these so-called experts who've never debriefed a cartel member or anything. They'll tell you, we need to follow the money, and it sounds good. Here's the problem. We've been doing it for 20 years. And when you have to work under the Fourth Amendment domestically, which we always will, it's one of the finest amendments in this country against unreasonable searches and seizures. It moves very slow by design, but outside the boundaries of our nation, where they're operating, as Lara told you earlier, in over 50 countries globally, it allows us to go after their assets real time and very rapidly and seize them and go get them. That's right. And then third and final is we need to look at them as networks and literally crush them. And it is absolutely fixable. The problem is what we are suffering from right now is a lack of leadership in the Homeland Security enterprise at a level I have never witnessed in my career.
Okay, so, you know, you can tell, I know, you could listen to Jason all day long, and if he had his videos and presentations and things here, it's even more fascinating. What I will leave you with is this. In 2016, I think it was 2016 or 15, we had 61,000 overdoses. It cost the United States $525 billion. We had 107,000 last year. How much did that cost the United States? That's before you even calculate the cost to families. What do people who are addicted to drugs never do? They don't vote. They don't vote. They don't write letters to their congressman. They don't pay taxes. They don't keep a job. They can't. And when you talk about pharmaceutical narcotics, the destruction to the human brain and the human body never repairs itself. Just go into the homeless camps all across California and you will see for yourself. I've done it. You won't, I had to go to 3 camps before I could find a person that I could in good conscience put on television. It destroys the brain. It destroys everything. There's no coming back from that. And if you then look at a man called Yuval Noah Harari, look him up. Because he says video games and narcotics are our answer for now to the problem of all these useless eaters. All of you, all of us, right? We're going to be the useless eaters. We have no value and no worth, and we just eat and take resources. That's how they view people. That's their word. That's his words. He's an advisor to the World Economic Forum. He's an advisor to Bill Gates, and so on and so on and so on, right? So I'm bringing this back to you to show the people that are getting into power on both the Democrat and Republican side, they believe in Yuval Noah Harari. They believe in an open border. The head of Smartmatic, Lord Malik Brown, close friend of George Soros, was on the board of the Open Society Foundations. What is Smartmatic? They run the elections all over the world, places like the Philippines, right? After this election, he was brought and made president of the Open Society Foundation. That was his reward. You wonder why the world shut down like that over COVID? Because they already put their leaders in power, didn't they? Their little puppets all over the place to go along with it. 6 presidents, 6 world leaders wouldn't go along with it. You know where they are today? All of them are dead. And it doesn't say murdered. You can look it up online. It says they're dead. But how come the doctor that was president of Tanzania, who had 10 COVID tests and tested an apple and a goat and a this and that, he knew when he sent it off to WHO, he's making a mockery of them. Came back with 9 positive COVID tests. And that man, at a young age, with no history of heart problems, died of heart failure, heart problems, right? And his successor brought in vaccines. Isn't that convenient, right? So how does it relate to our elections? Because if we don't have, because these policies that are being put in place are already globalist policies. The migration, what you're seeing along the border, in 2018, at the United Nations, they formally recognized migration as a human right. The first thing the Biden administration did when they got into power was say, you cannot use the word illegal. They don't talk about illegal immigration anymore. They talk about migration, right? As a human right. You can't be breaking the law if you're exercising your human right. Not God-given rights, as per the Constitution, human rights that humans assign. So we are already living under the globalist policies. They may not be the government, but they're dictating what's happening. In fact, they're handing out manuals explaining to people how to cross every country in the world in order to reach the United States. Journalists down on the border have picked up these manuals and seen them, right? It gives you, from the UN, step-by-step instructions. If you're fleeing something in your country, why do you have to cross, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 countries to get to the United States of America? If safety is your issue, you're putting yourself at risk. How many people are dying now?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are losing 300 of our fellow citizens a day. I want you to think about the moms, the dads, the brothers and sisters being impacted in this country. Think of that every single day to fentanyl and methamphetamine. That's just those two in this country.
And how many illegal immigrants are dying right now crossing?
Last month, we had 109 documented. The month before that, 111. Ladies and gentlemen, I had never seen in my career numbers that high, yet you hear nothing about it at the national level unless you watch Newsmax, because I put it out there all the time for the American people. But those are numbers that are not told to you. So there is an impact to not only these people who are crossing illegally, there's an impact to Mexican citizens by these cartels, and then of course, how our families are being impacted by the totality of what is taking place here. And I know we're short on time, but I want to say one thing to you here. As you leave here today, at some point, think about this old lawman from Texas that's here in front of you. Go on YouTube before you go to sleep and look at the streets of Philadelphia. And I want you to see how our fellow citizens and families across this nation are being impacted. Because people ask me all the time, Jason, how are you still going and keeping to do this? Every morning, we are seeing how Mexican citizens are absolutely being executed in horrific ways. And then we watch as our own citizens and these mothers and fathers who I'm interviewing, they feel abandoned by our government. So it's pretty easy to figure out what drives you to do this. But take this away. All of this is fixable. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not. We will get this terrorism designation, and we are going to crush these cartels for what they have done to so many innocent Americans and families.
So, in the last election, was anyone asked if an open border was what they wanted? Did anyone in this country vote on this issue? Did it go through the legislature? No. You weren't given an opportunity, right? You weren't. They bypassed the legislature. They bypassed the vote. They bypassed the system to implement an open border policy that most Americans do not agree with. So what you have is people who are represented by leaders and policies that don't actually reflect what they want. And that brings us back again to elections and why they're so important. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I want to turn now to another panel on solutions, which I know everybody is very passionate about. People want to know what they can do. They want to know how to do it. And, you know, we really have, there really are some great people who have given everything since the last election, who have done nothing but work on this issue, and some of them for very little in return. And they get attacked and attacked and attacked. And it doesn't mean, you know, that everyone is right about everything. It's just, it's sort of beyond the pale that in the United States of America today, this is where we are. And so if the panel could come up here, of course we have Craig Pasta Jardula, International Election Observer. Craig, if you can come up, and we have Mark Cook. Mark Cook, who's been reverse engineering every device around him since the day he was born, just about, his poor mother, and is a real cybersecurity election expert. Tim Canova. Tim, are you back? I'm limiting him. He's already had some time. No, I'm just kidding. Law professor, in case any of you have forgotten, and former congressional candidate. And of course, the formidable Patrick Byrne. Formidable and controversial and impossible to kill. He survived, I don't know how many quadruple bypasses and stage 4 cancer. Do you know anyone who's done a clinical trial with 100 people and only one survived? Not kidding. Yeah, and then he took a bicycle and rode across America numerous times, by the way, with his brothers. Does anyone have a presentation I don't know about before we go? No? Okay, good. Oh, what? You already spoke during lunch.
Oh, well, so, my understanding is I do have a half-hour presentation to do after this panel. Is that correct or not?
Well, you might have 30 minutes. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll
I don't
see.
know, but
Yes.
you asked, so I thought I would, I'm just responding. No, I'm not. You guys are running
Okay,
this thing.
I got it. Okay, so this panel is about solutions, and I know that Mark has a lot of solutions, and you know, I gotta say, some of them are pretty simple and pretty easy to do. So the midterms are coming up, and there's not a lot of time left, but 2024 is around the corner and definitely doable. So here are some very simple and practical things you can do, and Mark can tell you a little bit more about himself.
Cool, thank you, Laura, I appreciate it. So I'm an IT guy from Colorado. I started programming, writing software when I was 10 years old. Back before CompuServe and Prodigy, back in those days, I ran a very large bulletin board, one of the largest in the Western US, between probably 13 and 15 years old. Then the internet exploded, and of course I decided that I was supposed to go to college because that's what everyone else did. So I instead went to college and stopped writing software. The last piece of software I wrote was actually a search engine for bulletin board systems. So the next iteration of that would have been a search engine for the internet, but I made a little boo-boo and decided to go the college route when I should have just stayed with my passion. So fast forward, I've been doing IT for a very long time. I work with complex systems, embedded systems, mechanical engineering I studied, electrical engineering, computer science. If something exists and I don't know how it works, I like to take it apart to figure out how it works. And she wasn't kidding. So the elections happened. I knew something went horribly wrong, and I wanted to understand how our election systems worked. So I decided to try to take them apart virtually to figure out what all the components are, how they all work together, and how they could possibly be manipulated in a way that would have produced the outcome that we saw. Because I'm trying to get to the truth of what actually happened here. And when I troubleshoot computer problems, that's what I've got to do. I've got to figure out, how did I get to this point? What series of events occurred that brought me to this point? And I did the same thing with the election system. I looked at where are we, what do we see, and what are the things that could have happened within this complex system in order to produce the outcome that I witnessed. So there is a solution to all this, and it's actually very simple. For many years, I've solved a lot of problems using computers. That's what I do in IT. I take a problem a company has or a person has and use technology in order to solve that problem. And computers are great for that. However, the one thing I could not figure out how to solve was our election system. And here's why. Could a computer tabulate an election properly? Yes, it could. Could our voter registration databases work properly? Yes, they could. Could the poll books work properly? Yes, they could. Could our reporting systems work properly? Yes, they could. However, here are the problems. Very simple on the surface. They're extremely complex systems. Most of us are simple people that rely on these systems to control every aspect of our lives and all of our freedoms. And if we can't understand the very system that we use to provide us those freedoms, we cannot use that system. And that's why, for the one time in my life, I've got to say, computers can't solve this problem. We actually have to go the complete other direction, and we have to have a system that is 100% transparent, understandable, and verifiable by every single American citizen that uses it. So, thank you. So that's the long-term solution. I'll go into a little bit of detail in that. But I do want to go over what the 2022 plan I think should be. So we've got an election coming up here very, very soon. We've got another election coming up a couple years later. So I've got a short-term solution and a more long-term solution. So I'll go over this quickly here. Polling is really important. We need to do as much polling as possible, because if the output doesn't match what our polling shows, that highlights a problem, because the output should match the polling. So do polling, support polling. Poll watchers and judges, we need as many eyes out there as possible. So become a poll watcher, become a judge, get properly trained so you know what to look for. I've been a poll watcher myself. My mom told me a couple years ago, you better get involved and be a poll watcher. I had no idea how the election worked. She said, I just started and you need to do it too. So that's how I actually jumped in, was mom telling me I better get involved. And I'm very, very glad that she did. So learn what to look for. I see a lot of people that are poll watchers and they're just sitting there watching. When I went in the first day, I walked in the door, I didn't even know what to expect. I went through the little training, and I couldn't remember all the stuff they told us to look for. I walked in, they showed me a chair on the other side of the room and said, that's where the poll watchers sit. Here's the crossword puzzle you can work on while you sit in the chair at the end of the building there. And that's what I did for a couple hours. I sat there and watched from a distance thinking, gosh, I really kind of should probably be watching a little bit closer than I am. And the other person that was sitting there watching next to me, she just sat there and kind of watched from that chair also. So we were completely ineffective, but we were supposed to be made ineffective on purpose. We should have gone in with more knowledge. So go in with more knowledge, know what to look for, and know how to report it. There are a lot of, like Votify Now that Mark Fincham mentioned earlier. That's something that can be used, and other services exist also. Let's make sure our poll watchers are letting everyone know right away what they're seeing, because acting on that is extremely important right away, not waiting weeks or months or years, as we have found out. All right, investigations. We need to actually look for anomalies and act on them as soon as we see them. We need to look for patterns. We need to know what type of patterns to look for, so pay attention to that. Your sheriffs. The sheriffs are the law of the land, and I think where this is going to come is our sheriffs. I think they are the ones that are going to save America. So we need to find out who your sheriff is, make friends, help them understand what is important about their job with regards to election, empower them. Now, some of them may not want to play, that's okay. But some of them may just not know better. So support them, help them do their job. Sheriffs have never had to do this before. So educate them, work with them as much as you can. I think sheriffs should actually train and deputize citizens to at least be around and know what the law is, to help enforce those laws at the polling locations for when some of the election cabal decides not to play nice and make us stand 6+ feet away, or cover things up, or tell us things that aren't actually true to inhibit us from seeing what we're supposed to be seeing. Voter registration databases need to be cleaned. That's a lot of, I think, the crime begins there with falsified records. So do what you can to clean them. Make sure they're locked also. It doesn't do any good if we clean them and then right before an election, 20,000 records shows up the day before, right? So we need to find a way to lock them in place, and if we can't lock them in place, find out how to download them. And download them every single day so we can watch the changes over time. If they're not going to tell us what changes are made and who's making the changes, then maybe in some areas we can download those ourselves. or go in and get them every day if you have to. If you got to pay for them, go in, pay for them, and get them. Because a lot of times the election officials don't even know what's going on. This really, I think, is a system that was designed and engineered by very smart people that know far more than we do and that know far more than the election officials that are supposed to be using these systems know. And I think we're all getting conned. Now, some election officials might be in on it, but I don't think many of them are. I really think this is a massive con job.
You have it right. I think you have it right, Mark.
Yeah. So, drop boxes, they're awful. They're basically ballot laundering boxes. And so we need to do everything we can to get rid of them. They legislated them in, we need to legislate them out. If you guys want to camp around your drop box, little neighborhood party, and keep an eye on it in a legal way, I think that's great. The more eyes, the better. And just as a deterrent factor, it could work. If you got a drop box in view of your home, buy a little webcam that takes an SD card and point it through the window and let it sit there and record and just have the footage just in case. And I'm sure if you contacted one of us, we could probably tell you where to upload the footage or even help you do it if we needed to look at it. But again, as a deterrent factor, people knowing that all drop boxes are being watched now might change the game. It might make someone say that may have decided to launder traffic before, I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore because now there could be cameras everywhere. Make them know that. Early voting. Do not do it, and don't let anyone else do it. These people have created a feedback loop. They've got a bunch of different components in this system. They've got dominion over the entire system. Isn't that a funny name? So they've got full control over this, and they use the mail-in ballots with the USPS ballot tracking feature that they tell you is for you so you know where your ballot is. It's not for you. It's not for us. That's for them to know what real ballots were returned. The poll books are very helpful for them also because when you go in to vote, they know you're coming in to vote, so they know how many real people are voting. They already know what your party affiliation is, and they probably have social media profiles for you, so they can build a model of the entire election before they count a single ballot. They've got all the information they need, and if you go and vote early, you give them the ability to have that information early, so they have all the time in the world to pepper in the ballots they need to stick in that system to inject to counter your vote and disenfranchise you. So don't afford them the option of having that data ahead of time. Go in on election day only and vote, and make them work for it. Make them have to make that adjustment at the end all at once, because they're going to have to be very conservative knowing that's coming, or they're going to go right over and we're going to end up having way more.
How much more?
Just a little bit more.
No, we
Okay.
can come back for the end.
Okay. Okay, ranked choice voting. You might have heard of it. Get rid of that as well. That's got to go. And election day voting. I think 2-day election day holiday is actually the best, but we do need to have that because we need to make sure everyone can vote. I think questions are going to be later, and I'm going to get hit in the head here. So
Questions are going to be later, and also Mark is very accessible. He's very passionate about this. He's converted many hostile election workers and election officials and local officials. He's worked with Democrats and Republicans, many people who are concerned. Okay, so I know Patrick's getting antsy.
No,
at the
not
end
at all,
there.
not at all.
He has
Pasta.
ADD. Do you know that he has adult
No,
ADD?
I'm not getting antsy. I just want to hear
Yeah,
from
no,
Pasta.
he does. Okay, and so
And Tim.
Craig, go.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura Logan. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up today. This is quite amazing that we're here, and I really am humbled to be a part of this whole thing. My name is Craig Pasta Jardula. Pasta is my nickname. I'm an election integrity activist and an international election observer. And when elections really became serious for me was back in 2016. When the DNC lawsuit, the fraud lawsuit, was filed on the behalf of a bunch of Bernie Sanders supporters to go after the DNC for what they had done. Mainly concentrating on exit polls, but they were looking at a lot of graphs too as well, from what you saw with Phil Evans, who was one of the godfathers of pattern analysis. And inside that courtroom, then the DNC lawyer, Bruce Spiva, said, hey, listen, technically, if we wanted to, we can go into the back room filled with cigar smoke and pick whoever we want. We don't have to honor our charter. Well, that kind of set me off into this whole situation where a lot of you are here today, where we started digging into stuff and diving. I started following elections all over the country. All the primaries in 2020, I went to pretty much about 5 or 6 of them. California is where I lived. And then I started getting into international election observation because it just dawned on me. I said, you know, all this talk with all this malarkey that we're going on with this 27 days of voting, with this proprietary software counting stuff, how do these other countries get results in one day? So then I started taking off to see these elections in other countries. And I went to Nicaragua, I went to Honduras, I went to Colombia. And what I witnessed is that in the United States, we are witnessing one of the biggest frauds of all time. The fact is that they tell you that we can't have elections that are free and transparent with 1 day of voting, with mandatory ID, with whatsoever. They don't exist anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. No drop boxes. Very limited absentee ballot voting. Very, very limited. I mean, they don't even have it in these other countries. They don't have mail-in ballots. They laugh at this stuff. And more importantly, public counting, hand counting with public witnesses with 1 day and results that night. This is the biggest scam in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And if a third world country can do it, then we can do it here. Don't let them tell you anything. And that's why I printed out these 6 principles of elections. If my mom hasn't, she's walking around the room and she haven't got one from my mom, she'll get you one, okay? The no principle is the most important principle, which is the public must be heavily engaged. This is something I witnessed in Nicaragua, Honduras, and just came back from Colombia. They are heavily involved, and I'm not just talking about going and working the polls. As an American citizen, the way we get involved with our elections is poking and looking around and demanding answers from your election officials and your secretaries of state. And I'm not just talking about, can I work the polls? No, you want schematics. You want to know how many people that secretary of state or that election official is expecting to vote at this polling place in 1 day. How many volunteers is he going to hire, okay? If they're not going to hire many volunteers, what outsourcing are you doing? Are you going to hire another company to come on in and do the work that volunteers can do? Everything is in front of the people in the global south. Everything is right in front of them. It's the system that's in play. And to cheat that system and to cheat those people, it would be very hard because everything is transparent and in front of them. And that's what we need to do. We need to bring, and I know this might hurt, we need to bring U.S. elections up to Colombia standards. Shit, we need to bring it up to Nicaraguan standards. That's how much of a joke our elections are. I mean, we're living in a cartoon. So that's what we got to get out there and do right now. There's so many different ways to fix these elections because there's so many different ways to cheat them. Whether you're creating ballots. Hey, listen, I believe that there were probably more votes from Tweedledee, Tweedledum, Dumbo, Pinocchio than there are from illegal immigrants and felons. I really believe that because the system is made to be fraudulent. You can make up fictional people to stuff these ballots. And that's something we have to pay attention to. And finally, in closing, I just want to say this much. I had the honor of speaking at Defeat the Mandates with Lara in LA. We're very fortunate over the last couple of years to have doctors give us their opinions as a dissenting voice to what we see, what's going on with COVID. With the war in Ukraine, we're very lucky to have generals like Douglas MacArthur and people like Scott Ritter speak up on what's going on and the fraudulent things that are happening with the money we are just sending over across countries. But who do we have for elections? Is there an election doctor?
Us.
We have us. It's up to us. You made the first step by coming in the room today. But we got to do more. We got to get in their noses. We got to get in their face. We got to ask as many questions as possible. We can do this. We can change this system. Don't tell you it cannot be done in one day, because it can be done with results that night. And that's what we need to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pasta. Thank you. Of course, that was great. Yeah, I thought you were going to go through all 6. I was ready to kill myself. Okay, so of course, when Republicans or conservatives call for people to get out and be on the ground, it is a domestic terror attack on our democracy. When Mark Zuckerberg floods the system with money and illegal drop boxes and so on and so on and so on, they're saving democracy, right? And so that's the narrative in the media. That is literally the narrative that people have to live with. And it's a false narrative. It's obviously not true. So what do you do about that? Because you were a Democrat. I blame you, Tim.
Well, I shouldn't apologize for having been a Democrat at one point, because I went after the head of the Democratic National Committee.
Place for you in heaven.
I knew it was a corrupt Democratic Party when I ran against it. I knew I was up against a lot of odds, but I also knew that there was a grassroots out there that wanted Debbie Wasserman Schultz out of the DNC. We worked so hard for something like 8 or 9 months straight, and it came down to Election Day, and I went to vote myself, saw my name on the ballot, filled it out, and the moment you take the ballot here in Florida and you let go of it and it passes through a scanning machine is the moment you don't know who's counting it. It's those algorithms. It's a black box. And I had an eerie feeling when I let go of that ballot at that point. I don't want to go on too long. I already kind of told you the story of what had happened with the destruction of the ballots. Of course, the ballots were destroyed so that there was no check on those algorithms. So what to do about it? You've already heard 100% hand-counted paper ballots, counted at the local precinct level on election night, reported publicly at that point in time.
Counted on camera, right? There should be a live feed of the counting. Anybody
Absolutely.
should be able to see it.
Amen. Absolutely. And I'm all for Election Day being a national holiday as well.
Yep.
And to have a culture in this country where what we ask of citizens is, please do vote. Your votes are going to be counted, and you're going to be the ones counting them.
What about having like jury duty? What about
exactly.
What about having
that kind
people,
of that kind of a culture?
What about involving kids in high school so that they learn about elections, and you don't have to have poll watchers learning for the first time and not knowing their rights and being shoved in a back room or prevented, from being anywhere where they can actually see?
Absolutely. Sounds great. Pasta said we need to get into people's faces. I'll tell you one person's face that I think we need to get into. And it might not be popular to say this here. He's somebody who I voted for in 2018. That's Governor DeSantis. Mm-hmm. Governor DeSantis was asked a few months ago, I think. I heard it was from Lara herself who asked him, what do you think of hand-counted paper ballots?
I did, it's true.
Okay. And his response was, we don't want to go back to the Stone Ages.
That is
Okay.
true. And he did look at me like he wanted to kill me.
Well, that sounds like a soundbite that could have been written by election systems and election commissioner and a Republican election commissioner. The Democrat was Dr. Virginia Martin, and the two of them agreed, even though under New York law you had to use the machines to count those votes, they were going to have a hand count of every race on the ballot, and it's a check on the voting machines. Okay? It keeps the voting machines honest. So I would urge the Republicans who control the House and Senate in Tallahassee, and I would urge Governor DeSantis, you want to boast about Florida being #1 in election integrity? Time to step up and act. Thank you.
Well, and you created an election commission, right? And so use it.
Well, they have an election commission. I wasn't going to go into this. They had a press conference that they were indicting 20 folks for felons who were voting prematurely. They didn't realize they couldn't vote yet. And yet they've never brought a prosecution against Brenda Snipes for destroying 50,000 ballots. Okay.
Okay, so Patrick, I know you're the history buff. So we act like it's impossible for anyone to make a victory speech on the day of the election. But in our recent history, hasn't that happened a lot?
Absolutely, and it's what happens around the world within 3 to 6 hours in national elections. There's a really simple system that we teach all over the world with clear boxes. And in Chile, they just had a communist was elected a year ago, 2 years ago, and he tried to get a communist constitution passed by referendum. It just went down 68 to 32. People went, this very simple system, and it's not just enough that the system work, it has to be transparent and that everyone can understand why it works. And it's like literally plastic bags up in every precinct. People fill out their ballots, they walk up one at a time, drop them in. Little old lady sits in the precinct and counts how many people, any citizen can. 147 people voted? Great. Well, at the end of the day, they go up, they dump them all out. All the citizens can sit around and watch it. It's counted. I mean, the 147 matches, okay? Both parties or all the parties are there. It all gets counted, put back in the plastic bag with a note with the counts, and sealed up and initialed, and then sent to the county. Has to be counted where, this is another principle internationally, everything's supposed to be counted where it is cast. You really want to be counting these at the, was that here?
It's number 5 on Pasta's list.
But there's things that what you can do are we're going to be pressuring, and this is a big thing, and this is so big that the person who proposed it is this hero, Stephanie Lambert, up in Michigan. She had a black helicopter over her head last week in her house after a podcast about this. This is really a big deal. We're going to be trying to get people at the precinct and county level to commit after the election is run and the polls are closed. Yeah, go ahead and run things through the machine, but before you certify it, pick 2 things randomly, 2 races randomly. You have to wait until afterwards, and then you pick them randomly and just recount that. What people are finding, and there have been some examples of this in the primary, these are astounding. I walked through a couple of them earlier. They do the hand count. It happened in Kansas, happened in Georgia. Huge discrepancies between what just came out of the machine. They just run it through the machine. It says, and huge, a woman, a Democrat, who out of the machine had 26% of the vote and came in third in her race in Georgia, turned out to have 60% of the vote when they counted by hand. So there's all kinds of things like that possible. So, and it's really going to screw up the other side because they don't know what they can rig in advance if they don't know which races are going to be recounted. And the other thing we're going to do is get vets and retired law enforcement to work the polls. They want to save the country again. We call it one more mission. Come save the country again. And that's how you're going to do it. Doesn't take a handgun, doesn't take an AR-15. You folks are going to work the polls. And that kind of shuts up a lot of problems because what Soros is doing, Soros is hiring 5,000 goons. And they're going to go to the polls and they're going to try to pick fights. And they're going to say it is us that picked the fights and tried to disrupt this election. I've already heard that the DHS is teaching, in their indoctrination and their training, they're teaching that what's going to happen is there's going to be an attempt to disrupt the polls this year, and it traces back to Patrick Byrne. They've already been saying that. So I'm the villain. It's funny.
So it's actually, well, Patrick says it's funny, but actually, if you look at it, this is exactly what happened with January 6th. So, for example, you had a group like the Proud Boys, who for a long time have been called upon to protect people against Antifa at rallies, and that's what they discussed. And it's very easy for them to take that and say you were planning violence. No, they were planning on defending themselves against the people who are trained agitators, who are trained in how to incite violence and make it look like you are violent, right? So that's why they have rules for media that you're not allowed to put your cameras on them. You have to only put your cameras on the police, and so on and so on. I mean, they thought this all out. If you want to know how they do it, there's this website called Crime Think with a C on the end. You can go there and read all about it. Read all about it, okay? It's in their own words. It's paper after paper after paper. All the lessons learned from Minneapolis to Hong Kong to Moscow and so on and so on. And if you're really committed, there's a link there to the anarchist library, right? But I want to open it up now to questions because you've been very patient. And, okay, and I know and I promised question time. This lady right here.
So I'm wondering, I'm a poll clerk here in Florida. And
Place for you in heaven.
Matt,
Thank you.
do you want to take this microphone and go to questions, please?
best if you're a no party affiliate, because then you can work in any polling location. So in Florida, you have to have one Republican, one Democrat. If you cannot get that, they'll put an NPA instead. And so in Florida, if you're an MPA, no party affiliate, I was a conservative my whole life, but I wanted to become a poll clerk in my community. We are heavily GOP. There was no chance that I was ever going to be able to do that. I switched party to NPA. I no longer, I'm supposed to be, neutral anyway, one person, one vote. Now I'm a poll clerk. If anybody's interested in working as a poll clerk, come to talk to me later, and I'll tell you what the easiest way to do that.
And you get that all we want is honesty.
Yeah,
No,
no, it's all transparency. Number two, here's my big question for the lapdog media that likes to call our state elections. So we'll have the state of Florida called, and Alaska hasn't even finished voting at the polls. What can we do to get together, band together, and stop the media from calling our elections? Because that's what's happening.
Well, that's actually a very, very significant question, and it's one that rarely gets addressed because there's so much to work through that, by the time we get to reporting, everybody's exhausted, right, and ready to slip into a coma. And actually, I've mentioned Lord Malloch Brown a few times. You can look up online and find Lord Malloch Brown talking about the election, I believe it was in the Philippines, where they actually falsely reported numbers for one candidate, and he talks gleefully about enjoying seeing how that changed the entire election, right? And then what you find is there's a legion of races in the last election where candidates were losing votes on television, and it was captured. And if you go further back, there's other examples of that. Pete Sessions' election was another one. And what do they say when you point that out? Oh, well, you go to all the fact checkers, right? And the fact checkers write all these stories about, those are the TV results. Those don't mean anything. Never mind that they've influenced the election, right? That's the one point. And the second part of it is, okay, so I asked as a journalist, well, what's the difference then between the TV results and the other results? Not one election official has been able to tell me that to date. But maybe Tim can tell us.
I just want to tell what happened in 2016 with the media calling my election early. The day before the election. Well, first I should say.
Oh, that's right. And didn't they get the numbers extraordinarily accurate?
Yeah, exactly.
A day before.
Well,
I'm going to go to Vegas with that.
First of all, I'll say that in the weeks before, when you read a media poll, it's based on calls to 600 likely super voters who will vote even if there's the incumbents running unopposed. While we were knocking on 12,000 doors a week and entering it into the minivan, so we knew our numbers were even more accurate than these media polls. The day before the election, the NBC6 local website had a preview of the next day's elections. So for sheriff, for county commission, for any of the races, it says 0-0, but these are the races to look for tomorrow because no votes have been counted. Mysteriously, it had Wasserman Schultz defeating me by 14 percentage points with 69% of the precincts reporting. We called them up and said, what's going on? They took it down. We took screenshots. They took it down and never gave an explanation to this day.
And when the next day, when the thing occurred, when they had 69%, was she in fact?
Yes, she was ahead of me by those 14 percentage points with 69%, counted the next day, and she beat me by that much. Yes.
So if anyone thinks it is not baked in advance, it is so baked. That's hilarious.
And that's why it's really important. When Phil Evans was up here talking about this pattern analysis, it's so uber important. He was like one of the godfathers of this science, and it's what I kind of commented when I met Patrick. I said, Patrick, that was one of the most important things you showed in your movie, that big chart with those spikes. People are calling them anomalies. They're not anomalies. They are almost mathematical impossibilities. And that's what we need to call them. Also, to your statement when you said that register for non-MPA, let me tell you something, don't do it. Listen, they work for us. We don't work for them. You don't change it, because that's what happens in Nicaragua. When you go to the table to vote, there's one person from each party that is there. That's the way you do this. We don't move for them. They're supposed to move for us.
And let me just say, back to my election, on election night, as we're watching the results from our victory party, there was the local newspapers, the Sun Sentinel and the Miami Herald, who were hanging around me like vultures. They kept asking me, are you going to concede now? And I'm finally getting ready to leave the party late at night, and the same two reporters are there, are you going to concede now? And I'm quoted saying, I concede that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a corporate stooge.
Okay, this gentleman in the front here, your question, sir.
Hello, Matt Mack.
I was 8 years ago just a Brit. Now I'm a Brit American.
Congratulations.
So I'm looking at your system. Thank you. I'm
Mazel
looking
tov.
at your system through a horrified gaze. We do pretty much all 5 of whatever you have on your card. I mean, we have a 1 day of election, we have public counting, we have local counting, we have paper ballots only, etc., etc. You have more complications than a Swiss watch.
And you still ended up with Boris Johnson.
Right? Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, we have a selective party system. So there is no such thing as a candidate who's not approved by the party. That is the one thing that we have that doesn't work very well at all. As you can see from Kemi Badenoch having failed to become prime minister, which he should have done. The MPs scotched it. Anyway, I have a question, because my understanding is that the count is kind of leaked to some organization, which then leaks it to the media as it's going on. Is that right?
There's something called Edison.
Yes.
And Edison has the contract, and it's supposed to be getting these data feeds, and then all the media just builds one connection to one company.
Right.
Edison, although some of them.
So there's an agreement. There's an agreement with the Associated Press and the New York Times and some other media organizations. And what is happening is that county officials, election officials, often, when they send off the results from the count, they think they're sending it to the Secretary of State's office. But if you, as Mark has done, if you actually look at those addresses, very often it's going straight to Edison Research.
Right.
And then they don't leak it because they have an agreement. They put it out to the media.
But do they put it out only after the election has closed, the count has closed? Okay, so here's my suggestion. In England, this is illegal. The counts are only declared when the returning officer tells you what the result is, in public, on TV. The only counts that the media are allowed to do are exit poll counts, which is where they ask people coming out, did you vote Conservative or Labour? I would suggest you need to ban Edison and everything to do with it, because that is clearly going to be influencing elections.
Yeah, so the long-term solution, from what I think we need to do, is very simple, and it encompasses a lot of things we've already talked about. Same-day voting, election day voting, or 2-day election holiday, I like that because we have M through go through 1 day, and the other half go the next day. Very simple. At the precinct, on paper, we vote there, we count ourselves, okay? We scan the ballots. There's no personal identifiable information on the ballots at all, so each one of them should be scanned. All the tally sheets should also be scanned. There should be live stream. We can use technology to create transparency, okay? Using technology to create complexity? No. Using technology to create transparency? Absolutely. So we live stream the entire thing and record it. So you go to your precinct website and you look at the live stream of the entire tabulation of your precinct's ballots, which would be about 1,500 on average. You can pull up all your ballot images. Very simple. You see all the tally sheets. I want a box on the ballot that you can fill something out on that only you know what you put in that box, whether it's a Bible verse or a password of some type or anything you want to put on it that you know what that ballot is, but no one else could tie it back to you. Then when you're looking through those ballot images, you actually see your ballot. So now we have positive confirmation that our ballot was counted because we see it right there in that list. Then we watch the video and we see our ballot come around and we watch them mark the tally sheet based on the choices on our ballot. So now not only do we have confirmation that our ballot was counted, we have confirmation that our ballot was counted in the way that we voted it. Right there, really simple. We get the totals at the precinct. Those totals at the precinct are then made publicly available everywhere at the precinct. If someone wants to know what the county totals are, just add up all the precincts. Very, very simple. You want to know what the state is? You add up the county totals. Then, at the end of all this is, I think, the icing on the cake. Mrs. Smith and her 6th grade class have a project after every election, and their class project is to recount their precinct's votes. They get a great class project, teamwork, math skills, and a civics lesson of why they're doing that. And we do it in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Okay? That solves that whole problem, and our kids audit our own elections. It's done, and it gets audited by all our children. 6 years of them audit each one of our elections, and then by the time they graduate high school, they're about voting age, right? Are we going to have any trouble training someone on how to do this? Our kids will be able to do it with their eyes closed. No brainer.
And who's more honest than kids? My daughter looks at me, she's like, Mom, your eyebrows look like a monster.
I just wanted to say really quickly, too, about while we're talking about this subject, does anybody realize when you watch the TV and you see all these elections called at like 62% and 69%?
Oh, wait. Arizona, less than 10% of the vote counted. 2020. Anyone forget that?
You get those things because what do? They say, well, what Phil Evans was alluding today, we have a voting sample size that we know will not go out of that realm in which the other candidate can catch this candidate. Well, why doesn't that play for 2020 when Donald Trump was up like with 69% of the vote in and he was up astronomical amounts? Maybe because they knew something was coming in. I don't know.
They think we're this stupid. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm going to flip sides. This lady here.
Mike, I have kind of
No statements.
2 questions. One is, how do you manage the check-in process, the poll book? And in Florida, you can live anywhere in the world and vote in Florida because of the term legal residence. And you don't have, you can be homeless, you can, rent a room, whatever. How do you address that?
First of all, wipe the voter rolls out, period, because they are unfixable at this point. Just wipe them out. Everyone re-registers to vote. We move the voter rolls back into the purview of the counties and the control of the counties. The counties now control those rolls just like they should be doing, and they print out, before every election, paper poll books for their precincts, because the county officials know exactly who's going to be voting in those precincts, and that list gets printed out, given to the precincts, and if you're not on that list, you don't vote. It's real simple. You come in, you show an ID, your name gets crossed off the list, you maybe share your signature, they compare it, but we get a positive identification of that voter right there. That's how we fix that. It's real simple. We just move it back. We de-outsource it. Everything's been outsourced. Bring it back, decentralize it, and bring it back into the control of the citizens.
So that makes you a domestic terrorist, Mark, what you just said. Just to be
Oh,
clear,
by the
and a
way-
racist.
Sorry, yeah. I'm a proud election denier, by the way, Liz Cheney. I'm a proud election denier.
No, we're not.
Sorry.
We're not election deniers. They are election fraud deniers.
Yeah.
They are election fraud deniers. Remember to use that term.
By the way, the voter roll situation, if we limited absentee ballots, in other words, if we didn't have a mass mail-out ballot system and we didn't have a drop box ridiculous out in the middle of nowhere, that would wipe out 75% of the problem. One person, one vote to go and vote would just eliminate so much of that. You know what they do in Nicaragua and Colombia when you go to vote? They put a black mark on your thumb. Wears off in about 2-3 days. You can't vote again, but the process of showing up clears half of this stuff out of the water right away. We need to eliminate mass mail-out ballots, and we need to eliminate, not put cameras on them, because those cameras are going to require facial recognition, and they don't solve the problem, because even if you catch the guy, that ballot's going to go in with a bunch of other ballots. What are you going to do, eliminate them all? They need to go away. And I'm a based leftist telling you this. They need to go.
And the other thing is, what's happening is they're moving to e-voting, right? Where you vote by text and you vote by email. That is already being pushed. It's already started. I'll come to you next. And what that does is remove the voter entirely from the process, and the poll workers, and the election workers, right? The poll watchers, the signature verification. It removes everybody. You don't see any of it. So, and that is coming. It's already on the way. This lady here, I promised. Okay, no worries.
Mi nombre es Flor de Lis.
Her name is Flor de Lis.
Yo nací esclava del comunismo en Cuba.
She was born a slave to communism in Cuba.
He estado bien involucrada en
She's
todo lo
always
que
been
pasó.
very involved.
De hecho, estuvo el 6 de enero.
She was on January 6th in the Capitol as well.
Seguimos en las calles con las banderas.
They still stay out in the streets.
Si usted ve en la calle unos locos en los puentes.
She says, if you see people with Trump signs that we want, it's them. It's a big group she has.
Yo necesito de parte del pueblo ayuda en dos cosas.
She needs help from part of the country in two things.
La primera es
The first one is for you to know
que nuestros hijos están yendo a Cuba y están siendo adoctrinados
our children are going to Cuba and they're being indoctrinated
con el sistema electoral y educativo.
with the electoral system and the educational system.
Tenemos personas que vinieron de allá, se infiltraron
There's
aquí,
people that are infiltrated here.
están en nuestras universidades.
They are in our
como
universities with the professors,
se
and
están
they're recruiting.
se están manifestando todos los terceros domingos de cada mes.
They're
en Miami,
manifesting every third Sunday of the month
con las fotos de Fidel y del Che,
with pictures of Fidel Castro and the Che Guevara.
y nuestros líderes o nuestros
And-
rinos le están dando permisos para manifestar.
And our rhinos in our backyard are giving them permission to manifestate in that sense.
Nosotros estamos siendo atacados por ripostarlos a ellos.
We're being attacked to
Yo he sido apresada
She's
por
been to
cruzar una
jail.
línea amarilla
She's been to jail for crossing over a line.
de un hombre de estos que me atacó físicamente.
One of those men that are here infiltrated that attacked her.
Él rompió mis banderas, rompió mis ideas y me atacó.
He broke her signs, her flags, and attacked her.
Él tiene un delito civil
And he has a civil.
y yo tengo un delito criminal por
He has a civil infraction or whatever, but she has a criminal one for crossing the line.
Cuando yo miraba a esos jueces que ustedes pusieron ahí,
When you put the judges there that she saw,
estoy viendo cómo está el sistema de justicia. de
and
los
she's
Estados
seeing how the justice system of the United States is.
Para ustedes es muy grande y muy difícil
For you, it's very
entender
big
lo que está pasando.
and understand what's going on, but not for her.
Todavía mis pies tienen callos de caminar descalza.
She still has, her feet are rough because she was born in that system, and they're rough because she didn't have shoes. She had to walk barefooted.
Nosotros estamos siendo atacados, nuestros carros están
We're being
con una
attacked,
bandera de Trump.
and they're being marked for just seeing a Trump flag.
Yo tengo un pequeño negocio y como tengo banderas allí.
She has a little small business that sells fruit and vegetables out on the street, and she has flags of everything, DeSantis and all of that, and they attack her continuously.
Fuimos escupidos, la comida.
They have spitted at him.
Nos han hecho de todo.
They've done a lot of things to them.
Ahora, lo que yo quiero pedirle a ustedes es
Now what she wants to ask to you is education for the people.
ustedes saben la mitad de todo lo que están hablando, pero cuando nosotros nos involucramos en esto,
You know about the people that you are talking about, but when you get involved at this level, at her level,
nos dimos cuenta que somos neófitos totalmente
They
en
realized
elecciones.
that they're the less of the majority.
Cuando fuimos a las primarias,
When we went to the primaries,
nos percatamos que las personas que estamos libres en las boletas
they noticed that the people who don't have a party affiliation,
no votamos por ningún candidato.
they can't vote for any candidate. They just vote for the.
Pero lo supimos ahora,
But they just know that now.
después de 9 años luchar en las calles.
Espérate. She also confronted when she swore the association that you were talking about for her to register to vote.
Eric.
But she was new and she didn't really.
Y como yo, habían cientos y cientos de personas.
Like her, there were many people with the same situation.
No tenemos educación
They don't have education, electoral education, to be able to do that. And there's a lot of Latins that are involved trying to avoid communism.
We have a special team ready to reach out for the Latinas and Latinos. And there's a guy named Montenegro standing right behind you that we want you to talk to.
Montenegro.
And the chief operating officer of the America Project is Carlito, which I call as a little bit of a joke because he's this monster. Carlito, would you stand up?
Hay un nombre que yo quiero que todo el mundo recuerde aquí.
There's a name that she wants everybody to remember.
Este nombre es Carlos Lazo.
Carlos Lazo is his name.
Un espía.
He's a spy
Con los avispas.
Related to the avispas.
Responsable de las caídas de las torres hermanos al rescate.
Responsible for the towers of Brothers to the Rescue.
Y él es el que está llevando los niños americanos.
And he's taking an American children to Cuba to be indoctrinated.
Necesitamos ayuda.
We need help.
Y yo creo que ustedes más que nosotros, porque nosotros sabemos de
You
dónde venimos.
more than us, because we know where we come from. This was an
I know no one knows more than they do. We know that there are a lot of Latino immigrants who really understand what's coming in a way that these Blancos don't.
Otra cosa muy importante.
Another thing that's very important, and please forgive her,
Si no nos ayudan
if we don't get help, the Latin
a
community,
fortalecer nuestros candidatos,
to help to get our candidates to be stronger,
los rinos siempre van a estar en el poder.
the rhinos will always be in power.
Porque si no vamos a una elección primaria y quitar un rino,
Because if we don't go to a primary election and take out a rhino,
ahora estamos obligados a votar por el rino para
now we're obligated to vote for that rhino, and it's true, a rhino, and it's true.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas
Thank you
gracias.
so much. Okay, we're getting short on time here. And so we can only take a couple, 2 more questions. I'm going to go to this side. Nobody here? If not, I'll give it both. Okay, yes, ma'am.
DeSantis is going to be here Monday, Tim.
Okay.
We'll talk after.
Okay, this is for questions, not statements. Okay, the gentleman in black. Gentleman in black, sorry, no, him first.
There was an excellent suggestion that we try to influence the state legislature to consider hand counting as a check on machine voting. I just wanted to know if there's an organized effort underway to influence the legislature.
It's called, this isn't legislature. What's nice is it bypasses all that. It's called double-checked, as in past participle, doublechecked.org. It just launched. It's a brilliant woman a lawyer up in Michigan. It launched just like a week ago, right? Or has it been, anyway, she just started, anyway, doublecheck.org. And it's a effort to try to help people go to their local precinct and county people, and a lot of them do want to run. We think almost all of them do want to run a clean election. And it's a very easy sell to them, you have every right in the world at the end of the election, after you count the machine, but before you sign your name, just do a quick spot check.
And this is going to specifically involve the Florida state
No,
legislature.
this is national, and it's a
So
more.
I'm asking if there's an effort underway specifically regarding Florida.
Not specifically Florida.
Thank you.
But double checked. It is if you folks, if a few people take it up here, doublecheck.org. There's one for each state. Go ahead and see what they have going for Florida. They make it very easy. It's very nicely designed. You look up, okay, I'm in Florida. You look up your county. It lets you know exactly who to get in touch with and start calling and pitching this idea to.
By the way, there's 2 states that are right now pushing. Mark Fincham, who's back there somewhere, he was pushing for a temporary injunction to ban the machines to count. And Mr. Machant over there, who's running for Secretary of State in Nevada, has made some movements over there too as well. I believe there's one county over there that they're going to try to hand count. This is unprecedented over here that we're going to do this, because if we can get to hand-counted paper ballots, changes the game.
And just so you know, Louisiana just pulled out of ERIC, right? So you should look at that. It's really interesting to see what they said about it. Okay, so the last question, this lady over here.
This question is an extension actually of something earlier, but then Mark Cook also mentioned it, and I have a question about it. I know in-person voting is the way to go, but the confusion for a lot of people, because Greg Phillips, which I'm sure you all know who Greg Phillips is saying in his interviews that it's not just that in Arizona, the benefit that they had was not just in-person voting, but early in-person voting, because it messed up the algorithm. Not that I understand what that is, but the algorithms, or whatever, however you say it, and that it gums everything up. So he's encouraging people to do early in-person voting as well as those that are going to vote, because he said they know the Republicans are going to vote in person on Election Day, and they already figured that out. So what gums it up is early in-person voting. Do you agree with that? I mean...
No. Early counting leads to early fraud. That's all it does. Just think about this for a second. If I'm an establishment candidate and I'm holding on to the election systems, in other words, I'm controlling the election systems, right? My Secretary of State is signing the contracts, we're running it and stuff like that. I get early voting in. I know which county of my establishment cohorts are running behind. I can then rally my troops to get more votes there. I can then take away some of their ballots and say they weren't valid. Early counting leads to early fraud, plain and simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you look at what they've legislated recently to put us in this position, we just need to do the opposite. It's very, very simple. That's how we reverse this. We just do the reverse of what they've pushed on us.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much to the panel. You did an amazing job. Really appreciate it. Get the hell off the stage. Come on, let's go. Chip, chop, flip, flop. I'm just kidding. Thank you very much, Pasta. Thank you, Mark. And they're all around. We don't have very much longer to go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Graham Ledger, Patrick Byrne, and then a very quick close by myself. I know it's been a long day. Do you want to shake, stretch, breathe? I was going to say shake your booty, but I'm not allowed to do that, am I? Thank you. Okay, so. Yes, of course. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so Jason and I touched on this subject, right? Do you see what I'm doing? Can you talk to someone? Okay, it's all right. There's other people, though, who can help you with that, ma'am. So, for example, Matt, because I haven't given Matt enough to do today. Ma'am, Matt is right there. Gentleman in the black T-shirt, and he can help you, okay? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, man who's been here all day long and who's been very, very patient is Graham Ledger. And, you know, we touched on this subject, Jason and I, a little bit on how the elections affect, how the border affects the elections. And so Graham is going to expand on that. He's been studying, reporting, and understanding a secure southern border. And he is also going to introduce Patrick, although you kind of know Patrick a little bit by now. And Graham, where are you? There he is. Come on up here. Come join us. The floor, monsieur, is all yours. Yeah, let's swap.
Isn't she doing a fabulous job?
It's always a good idea to blow smoke up my ass, right?
No, no, no. You are doing a family, and you're doing God's work. Mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Señor Graham Ledger. I speak a little Spanglish, just enough to get me in trouble down in TJ. I tell you about that in just a moment, but I want to ask you a question first. And I will be brief like Fruit of the Loom, because this guy has to talk. You can come up here, Patrick. It's your stage. Just don't heckle me, okay? How many of you, and you too, how many of you know how many constitutional amendments are there? Just raise your hand. Don't blur it out. How many constitutional amendments? We have one hand? Maybe there? Oh, come on now. So that's 4 people. How many? 27, correct. Why in the wide world of sports is Graham Ledger asking about that? Well, I'll tell you in just a minute. I want to let you know that I am a recent immigrant to Florida. And I am here to defend Florida, which is what I recommend my friends who I left behind in California do. So we want the patriots out here, right? But we don't want the other ones. It's my belief, and I've been quoted recently about this in the mainstream media, that I'm inciting a war. I'm not. I just believe that we're in a civil war right now. People ask me, is there a civil war? I think we're in one. And I believe it's red state, roja, versus blue. How do you say blue? Azul. Azul. Gracias.
I don't agree. Sorry.
That's okay. It's a separate panel. I am honored to be here, and I love Florida. Thank you for letting me in. You have a rock star governor. He is the antithesis. He's not perfect, but he's the antithesis of the maniac that we tried to recall in California. I believe that God has brought me here, and a harmonic convergence with this gentleman, Patrick, and General Mike Flynn, and Carlito, and many other patriots. And I believe that we can solve this problem, this election problem. I know that I was queued up as talking about the border. I think maybe I'll infuse some of that in, and I'm going to make this very brief, but the border obviously plays a huge role in what we're trying to deal with here. I lived most of my adult life along the border. Ironically, it's the most secure portion of the southern border, which is San Diego. It's at Tijuana, you know, TJ, is just south of San Diego. And of all people in 1993, it was Bill Clinton under Operation Gatekeeper and Janet Reno. Remember her? Yeah, Janet Reno. But they created the most secure chunk of our southern border, double-layer fencing back in 1993. The annual apprehensions in San Diego sector was about 500,000 every year prior to 1993. Now it's a few thousand. So tell me that fences don't work. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to let you know that, like Laura, I'm a recovering mainstream media person. It's a 12-step process. What step are you on? Have you fully recovered? I'm okay. You don't have to answer that. I'm on step 11 and a half. I have a chip. Do you have a chip? The media are the enemy. In 2003, you may remember a guy named Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's all right. You remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? He ran for gubernator. Well, I was doing the news in San Diego at the time at the CBS affiliate, and I would periodically go into the news director and say, hey, you know, we're going to have a recall election here. And they said, oh, no, you're just a right-wing wacko. Sit down, just go read the teleprompter like you're paid to do. And every once in a while, I would check in with them and said, hey, there's momentum. There's momentum. There's more signatures. It's never going to happen. Well, sure enough, it did happen, right? But that's the way the media work. Media are the enemy because they propagandize. And the greatest weapon the media perpetrates on the American people is the weapon of ignoring. And Hunter Biden's laptop is maybe the greatest example of that. So I fought wars behind the scenes on behalf of people in San Diego, many of the wars that most people never knew about, just simply trying to balance stories or cover stories. And then you fast forward to 2021, where we tried to recall that maniac governor, Gavin Newsom, who, by the way, wants to be your president. And he's going to run. He is the most dangerous political animal I've ever seen in my life. Because he's a lunatic, and he doesn't know he's a lunatic. And he's been schooled by a family full of Marxists, including Nancy Pelosi. So in 2021, we were gathering, I was part of the recall effort, we were gathering signatures, and we were hitting critical mass, and once again, the media ignored it until they couldn't ignore the story anymore. But once the signature threshold was met and there was a recall, of course, the media played a role in keeping Gavin Newsom in his job. And do you know what more or less percentage Gavin Newsom got, so-called, of the vote? And by the way, the polls closed at 8 o'clock in California local time, and at 8:01 they declared him the victor. Kind of like in Cuba. See? He won with somewhere in the neighborhood of 73% of the vote. Joseph Stalin would be very proud of that, don't you think? What is the formula in California to corrupt the vote, though? The formula is pretty simple, and that is install Marxists into the electoral process, either by getting them voted in or installed by people like Gavin Newsom. The other is to propagandize now generations of future voters into accepting that they are the proverbial frogs in the pot. And the heat is being turned up and turned up and turned up. And one of them, unfortunately, is my daughter, who still lives there, and I'm begging her to get the hell out. But the third way is what has been touched upon and dovetails into what the introduction was, is immigration. Both legal and illegal immigrants have taken over now 25% of the population of California. That is a huge number. Now, we are America, and we want to welcome legal immigration. But if you're allowing immigrants into this country who either don't care or dislike the United States Constitution, you're in trouble. So this is the formula that California has perpetrated on its people. And now you get the results that you have, and that's Gavin Newsom with 73% of the vote. It's a one-party system in California. The truth is, in 2017, 11 counties had more registered voters than eligible people to vote. And even though there's been an election integrity project there, now it's 23 counties. And they're trying to replicate it here. So my warning to you is I'm seeing all the warning signs that they did in California here in Florida. And you mentioned Ron DeSantis. One of the things that DeSantis can champion in the state is something called E-Verify. You familiar with that? All it does is a database to check if you're in this country legally or not. That's it. It's a very simple process. So these are the things that can be put in place because, as I'm saying to you, they are trying to institute the same thing they did in California, in Texas, and in Florida, and in other key states. What I am suggesting we do in terms of fixing this problem, and I'll make it brief again, is do what you're doing. You're doing the perfect thing. You're educating yourselves, and you need to be evangelists and go out and educate other people. The other is to get involved. As Patrick was talking about, the double check is a great way to get involved. If your neighbor, like mine, goes down to the polling station on the primary day a couple of weeks ago, I saw him down there and he's a poll watcher. A third way is to make sure that we elect people who will uphold the United States Constitution and voting integrity. Arizona is a great example, right? This guy named Rusty Bowers, you familiar with him? He's the guy who stood in the way. He's the reason that Patrick had to initiate the Arizona audit. Rusty Bowers stood in the way of just simply examining the vote. I'm wrapping up. But what did the voters do 2 years later? They got rid of him. They didn't vote for him when he ran for United States Senate. My favorite way to fix this thing permanently is something called an Article 5 Convention of the States. This is why I asked about how many times the Constitution has been amended. That 27 times has been done one way, but the framers of the Constitution gave us a second way, and it's the citizens' way through the states. Some of you are familiar with Convention of the States. I urge you to get familiar with it. But what it is it allows us through the states to amend the Constitution directly. So how about a constitutional amendment that codifies, for example, voter ID? How about a constitutional amendment that includes a single election day? All of the things that you have been talking about.
Don't agree, again.
She doesn't agree.
No.
Well, let me tell you this.
Horrible idea.
I'm wrapping up here. Horrible idea. We'll have a debate later. We have 19 states now that have signed on to a Convention of the States. 19. We need 34 to hit critical mass to trigger it. And many other states have it in the system right now. So I encourage you to get involved in one way or another. And Convention of the States, whether you agree or not, is an option. And even if you don't agree with Convention of the States, you should participate. You should. And even California will
States and that have signed up to eliminate the electoral college, right? I mean,
yes,
like,
but
there's lots of bad ideas that are floating out there that have got endorsements.
But all you need is 13 states to say no.
Come on.
Right?
Tip top.
So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to work with this gentleman who is the founder of Overstock.com, as well as the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2012, and is now the CEO of the America Project, which sponsored this event, the great Patrick Byrne. Patrick.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much. I have planned a 30-minute talk. Everyone has to go. I know we got to tell it. I'm going to blast through it quickly. I have a, here we are. Election integrity, how we got here. You ready for some international espionage? You're going to discover you're in the middle of a spy story. Okay, you ready for this? You ever seen those YouTubes where there's like a frosted platform and there are people out standing over the Grand Canyon and then somebody hits a button and it goes clear and they all look and they all get shocked to understand they're standing over 2,000 feet? I think I'm going to do that too. Okay, in a way. I've tried this. I gave this talk once before about a week ago, and I discovered the audience kind of had that sensation, I found out. Here's a concise proof regarding, it sounds like no one here really needs to be convinced anymore. This came out on June 3rd from CISA and DHS. It says there are 9 vulnerabilities, which is a charitable word for this. An attacker could leverage, this is their statement, and it's 9 vulnerabilities in the Dominion systems, and it's, an attacker could leverage this vulnerability too. And number 1 is install malicious code, which could spread to other devices. And number 2 is disguise malicious applications on a device, gain elevated privileges on a device, and or install malicious code. Escalate privileges and or install malicious code. Spread malicious code to other devices from the EMS. Escalate privileges and or install malicious code. Print an arbitrary number of ballots without authorization, which means that all the lies about, well, there's always paper, so you can't, that's all you really need to check. No, because if you know this hack, you can print all the unlimited number of ballots you want without authorization. Access sensitive information, perform privileged actions, An attacker with physical access may gain administrative privileges, install malicious code, and do anything he wants. And by the way, to do that, all it takes is plugging into the back. It looks like a telephone cord on the back of these called RS-232. The technician plugs this thing. He gets root level access without a password to the systems. So to call these vulnerabilities as charitable, these are security failures. I don't mean to be arrogant about it. I built a $2 billion e-commerce company. We fought 1,000 attacks a day. 1,000 attacks a day come at a company like Overstock.com. There's a whole big room of people like this fighting 1,000 attacks a day. I know a thing or two about a thing or two when it comes to this. Anything like this is so funny that I deal with journalists. I mean, not to be disrespectful, but there's people making movies. The guy there's people making movies and stuff, and I confront them with this. You know, people on the other side who still are election fraud deniers, and they say, well, how do you know? Okay, so it's been identified. And by the way, the DHS no longer says most secure election in history was 2020. They now say, we don't know if these exploits have been used in any previous election. Would you agree that's a long way from saying the most secure election in history? They're not, okay. But I deal with journalists who say, well, it still doesn't mean necessarily it's happened. I want you to imagine that you were dealing with someone who had built a submarine, or that we were talking about a submarine in a dry dock, and it was about to be put to sea, and someone comes along and says, well, we've done these computer calculations, and we have figured out that if we just drill a hole, actually 9 holes down the side of the hull of this submarine, we've modeled it on the computer, and it's actually going to gain 5 knots in speed. It's going to be great. And imagine you said to that person, you know, it really isn't going to work that way. I promise if you put that to sea, it'll sink. And that person says, well, you don't know that. You don't know that. I mean, it hasn't been done, hasn't been demonstrated. It's like, no, you start explaining to them, look, I understand water, I understand air, I see how it works. I promise if you put that to sea, it's going to sink. I promise if you release into the wild a system like this with these 9 vulnerabilities in it, it's going to come under, especially an election system, it's absolutely going to be hacked. Saying otherwise is as silly as saying, well, you can put a submarine to sea and drill 9 holes in the side. Well, you really don't know if it's going to go sink or not. It's absolutely silly. I don't want to antagonize the journalists, but that's what, I should get like hazard duty pay or hardship pay, that's what my life is talking to people and having that conversation and trying to explain that thought to them. It absolutely is, there's no such thing. And in addition, that line of argument so I like to call this somewhat immodestly, DHS's report, I call it the Patrick Byrne was right again report. That represents my stated knowledge on about October 30, 2020. Also, in case there be any final doubt, the wonderful Tina Peters did this before and after image, which got sent off to Professor Emeritus of Computer Science in Texas, and Jeff Donnelly downloaded it. And what they found was exactly the kind of cloaked script that rigged the election of November 2020 in Grand Junction, Colorado. And now the other side has tried to say, well, no, they're wrong. It was this person in the office made this very complicated mistake, and she did it, but don't worry, she's been fired. Well, she denies doing it. The surveillance camera has an odd 2.5-minute glitch on the grounds that everyone in the room went perfectly still for precisely that 2 minutes and 34 seconds, so the motion activation went off. And incidentally, the same glitch was found in the April 2021, on that image. They also discovered that same glitch in exactly the same place in the election counting. 3 days into the counting, something inside the computer woke up, saw that the results were outside of a certain guardrail, and just moved basically 30% of the votes and did this tricky business, and you can't unscramble it, but it was totally illegal, and everyone agrees it was illegal. But, and just to let you know, I'm not going to reveal who, because it's there, but, so that glitch, which they come up with this cockamamie story about, but it was a cloaked script did it, happened not only in the election 4 months later, but you're going to be hearing very shortly in a legal filing, it was in fact discovered, unbeknownst to the world, there has been examination of the election database of one of the major places in this country, a major location in this country, and they have found exactly the same thing. On a place involving over 2 million votes in the election. So that's going to be, you're going to be learning about this in a court filing this week. So this thing has been proven up, down, and sideways. It's silly to deny. Given this constellation of facts, I say the election fraud deniers are the ones whose beliefs are baseless. Would you agree? Now, we are graced with the presence of some journalists today. Yeah, well, not you. Not you. I mean, we're always graced with your presence, but no, I mean some mainstream journalists who are the kind of, do I have to wrap up? Is that what this is? Oh, really?
People are packing their bags. Are you reading the room?
No, actually, I wanted to do my 30-minute speech.
Okay. You're doing the whole
Yeah.
30 minutes? Okay.
That's what, you can leave if you want. Some people want it.
You changed it to 30 seconds.
Well, I'm actually going to do it. Leave if you want. Say again? How did we get here? Here's the optimistic version. You're in the middle of a Bezmenov psyop. A Bezmenov psyop is to take over a nation through a four-step process where you demoralize the people, disorient them, force a crisis down their throat, and then you normalize. And you do and what you're trying to do is create the psychotic situation that people detest, and then you force the crisis down their throat, and you're saying your only way back to reality, to normalcy, is just to accept what just happened. That's a Bezmenov mile psyop. In our case, the demoralization is beautifully explained in Naomi Wolf's book, The Bodies of Others. No one here needs COVID explained to you how the response was not driven by science. Secondly, the disorientation, Antifa, BLM, that was to tell you you're not living in America anymore. These things are happening that are supposed to disorient you. Then the crisis was, of course, the rigged election. And the normalization is this canceled culture you're living through. So these strange things that have happened over the last 3 years, the cancel culture, the Antifa, the crazy election, this COVID thing, and people demonizing, drugs that are like aspirin, like hydroxychloroquine, that have been around for years. Ivermectin, I see here. This stuff is like 5 cents a pill. It's over the counter in most of the world. It's the World Health Organization has it on their list of like the most ubiquitous necessary drugs in the world. It was all demonized. So these weird things that happened in the last few years were not random. They all fit together this way. That's what's going on. That's the optimistic version. And if that's the case, what's going on is someone like the World Economic, basically Nazis 2.0. The Central European villains who have represented us for 250 years are getting at us this time through this mechanism. And we're being turned into a component of some sort of global European superstate kind of affair. That's the optimistic version. The pessimistic version is this. Let's talk about an arc of destruction. When countries go through genocide, this is how it comes about. There's polarization, an event that is supposed to terrify people, and it terrifies you. What happens when you're terrified is you stop using your frontal lobe to think. You use a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight mode, you're not using your higher reasoning. And people look around for cues. We become herd animals again. We become herd animals. We just look for cues. Think of all the crazy conversations. If you have followed COVID at all, or the election thing, and you talk to people and you try to explain it, and people who are caught up in the psyop, isn't it funny how they can't even absorb data? You can hold them up things from the CDC, things from the FDA. You can show them things. They just cannot process. You might as well try to reason with a drowning man. Drowning man you can't reason with. There's And it's just like that. They're thinking from their amygdala. Next, tribalization. It's us and them. It's us and them, those who are in on it, those who aren't. The demonization. It's those people, you know, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. These dirty unvaccinated people are who's keeping the pandemic going. And you need a visible symbol, a yellow star, a mask, something that we can separate us from them. Remember, the yellow star started because the claim was that the Jewish people from the East were carrying, I forget what the plague was, which plague it was, but it was really about that. And the idea was they have to wear yellow stars and they can't walk on the sidewalk because they can't get close to us because they carry these diseases. That was the, the whole rationalization. And then the last stage is genocide. So this is why I want to heartily dispute what my new and dear friend Graham Ledger was saying. This is absolutely not a war between Democrats and Republicans. Absolutely not. This is a war, well, not a war. This is the in-group and the out-group. The people who get this are the in-group. Who we're against is those who would divide us. Their whole, and I think at the deepest level, it's China behind this. And they win. Who's ever behind this wins if we go violent. Who's ever behind it wins because it's been modeled out in the national security circles 15 years ago. If we have a civil war, 90% of us die within the first year, and it's not from the fighting, it's from the collapsing supply chains. There's a book about it that you might want to read called 1 Second After, who our dear mutual friend introduced me to. It's about a U.S. after an EMP strike, and it's about how society unravels, really over about 30 days. We're living, half of the people over 50 are living on pharmaceuticals that within 6 months you die if you don't have them. There's only 30 days of pharmaceuticals in the supply chain. There's 3 days of food in the cities in the tip of the supply chain. After 3 days, anyway. So if the point is, the other side, their only weapon at this point is violence. They are trying to instigate violence. And we have 7 weeks to turn the other cheek. 8 weeks, whatever, down to 60 days, 59 days, so 8 weeks to work and to stop this. If you don't, if we don't get, first of all, if there's any violence, we lose. They're trying to do another J6. J6, I'm sure we all suspect, a heavy degree of engineering. I do think some MAGA people got carried away. And there's an old saying from Scotland, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. The word, yeah, MAGA, yeah, J6 was engineered, but there were hundreds of MAGA people who got carried away and fell for it. We can't ever fall for something like that again. What's really going on, there was a book in 1993, 2 Chinese colonels who called Unrestricted Warfare, which was basically how they were going to take down the United States. And it's 6 different levels, and there's cultural war and economic war and war through international relations and such. It's only the 6th of them has anything kinetic, has anything about what we call war. Everything from, and if you read this, you'll be shocked at how they were very public about it, and they just put it out there. There was a book called The 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury. He's kind of a colleague of Peter Navarro, and maybe a few years older. And he basically was a lifelong China dove. And he came out and said in 2015, he went with Kissinger to China. He opened up China in '71. He was all about building China. He came out in 2015, said, huge mistake. China's on a 100-year plan to take us down. They started in 1949. By 2049, they replace us and turn us into a vassal state. Actually, around 2010, they moved it up to 2030 as their goal, and they now are saying they're well ahead of that plan. They think we're there. This is not it's funny when I talk to Americans who are talking about 2040, 2050, they don't get it. You got like a year or two. We're right there. Look up what the revolutions were like in China and Venezuela and such. This isn't a 2030 thing anymore. Every nice house in America, there is someone in China who already has a deed to your house. Literally, there's some Chinese general or colonel, PLA, or Communist Party guy who he has a deed in China to your house. He looks at your house on Google Earth once a month. He looks at the new hot tub you added in the back. He thanks you for it. And he knows when the smoke clears, that's his house. And if you don't believe me, look up the retirement speech of the Minister of Defense. This is Zhonggang, Jun something something, Juyi Chur Hao Tian. Anyway, the guy named Chur Hao Tian, CHIHAOTIAN, Minister of Defense, then Vice Chairman of the party and such. In 2003, he gave a speech that leaked, the biggest, highest level leak in Chinese history, and it's everything I just told you. Basically, there was a deal made in 1993 between Russia and China after they saw what happened with the Soviet Union, where when it's all said and done, Russia gets Alaska and Western Canada, China gets the United States and Eastern Canada. There's to be a civil war. They're going to use biological agents, and it's all put in there. It's all in this guy's speech from like 03, 05. Biological agents, civil war, we get wiped out. There's going to be a period where the country is carved up like the Southwest is left to the cartels. Other nations get different parts of the United States with an order like loot, burn, pillage, whatever you want for 3 years. And they strip it, and then it turns into a Chinese colony. And the top 3 security concerns of China are food, food, and food. And they turn us into a colony with the greatest farm in the world. And you got to read this guy's speech or read any of this stuff. I know this sounds far out to you. So that's what your election, the tip of the spear of all of this, the tip of the spear was the election heist. So what you're doing, you didn't know you were going to be in the middle of international espionage. You're in the middle of international espionage to collapse the United States. The southern border is just one more aspect of collapsing our nation. What's the collapse of the southern border? So your work, that I hope is the frost over the platform of the Grand Canyon. That's the work you're doing. What you're doing is defeating that if you do it well. And if you don't, your grandchildren will not, your children will not have any idea what America was once like. You will be in 3 years, you'll be telling people, there's really nothing else. We're kind of shocked when we meet people who don't get it. We meet billionaires all the time who want to come and hang out with the Flynns and talk geopolitics. They can't write a check. They're all afraid. They're all afraid to get involved. They're the first against the wall when the revolution comes. They have no idea what's coming for them. And this is your last chance. So play that song to yourself every morning, that Eminem, what's it called? One shot, that Eminem song. That's where you are in history. You got 8 weeks to pull it together. Best of luck. Stay peaceful. Thank you.
No, that wasn't too long. Okay, everybody, this is it. We've reached the end. I have to say, well, it's not often that I hear something that really moves me, but that sentence, that statement Patrick just made, your children will not have any idea what America was like. Your children will not have any idea what America was like. In a digital world, you can erase books, you can change the book, you can change the ending, you can change the deed, the title to somebody's home. You can do it from thousands of miles away. Those 2 Chinese colonels updated that book. They've issued a new version. And guess what? This is called 5th generation warfare. It's not civil war, it's 5th generation warfare. And actually, the Chinese have experience with drug warfare going way back to the Opium Wars. You'll read online that the British bought opium and that's how they kept Taiwan. Actually, the Chinese had opium already, but the British bought opium from India. That was different. And so the Chinese have experienced this. They've paid a price for it, right? And they know how to do this. And I'll leave you with this story. Everyone knows Jack Ma, Alibaba, brought the internet to China. That's the story anyway. I did a story with Jack Ma for 60 Minutes. And I met him, and we were with him for a few weeks in China. And one day I met him in a tea room. It was really fascinating. My producer was mad as hell after that interview because he said it was completely unusable. And Jack Ma and I sat there, and we were served tea that was 2,000 years old. The average Chinese person cannot afford that tea, right? In fact, most of China can't afford that tea, only a small population. But I want you to think about that. The tea was 2,000 years old. I didn't even know tea could survive that long, I'll be honest, okay? Red wine, yes, no, I'm just kidding. Okay, and Jack sat there and he said to me, the problem with you people in America is that you have no understanding of history. You have no patience and you have no vision. You don't understand. We're playing the long game. Now, I don't believe that this is China on its own. There are other forces at play here. Technology is a huge part of this. Transhumanism, the aspirations to become gods that have been stated, absolutely stated by Yuval Noah Harari and the others. All of these things come into play. But the reality is that every single thing we're facing, it's the most extraordinary thing. The Founding Fathers knew this day would come. The Founding Fathers knew that this day would come. And they asked us, I just took an oath to the United States of America when I became a citizen. And what was I asked to do? To protect this nation from all of its enemies, both foreign and domestic. You know all of it, right? You all know it. And this is the moment where we are today. And everything that we need is in the Constitution. Everything that we need is in that document. It must be peaceful, it must be legal, and it comes from God. This is a spiritual war. Rachel was right. This is a war against God. This is a war of good against evil. You already know it in your hearts. And so I want to thank everyone for being here, because I know it takes a lot. It does. It takes a lot. But the last thing I want you to think about is we talk about the risk and we talk about what people have lost. And when we do that, we miss what's right in front of us. Risking everything right now is a gift. Very few people get in their lifetimes to do something that really matters, to define where we go for generations, right? I mean, that was never what was available to us, because it seemed to be settled, but it's not settled. And so this is an opportunity now. Instead of looking at it as what am I risking and what am I losing, the real question is, what are you gaining, right? What are you gaining? Because I can tell you this, there is no way on earth that my children are going to grow up as slaves, right? There's no way on earth that's going to happen. And so I call it flicking the switch. When I lived in Afghanistan with the soldiers, I never thought every day about how nice it would be to sit on a toilet or have a hot meal. I thought, I'm the only place in the world that I actually want to be. It doesn't matter how hard it is. We get one chance. We get one chance, and that chance is now. So thank you so much. Thank you to the America Project. Thank you, Joe Flynn and General Flynn and the Flynn family, the Fighting Flynns, they call them. Thank you, Patrick Byrne. Thank you, Florida. Don't go easy on Governor DeSantis, doesn't matter. Don't go easy. Thank you so much for coming. Go have a drink.
The Grennans, they have been put in jail for over the last 2 years.
Oh.
They've been put in
talk about January 6th, but it's over now.
My friends are the Grennans, and they arrested him and his sons, and they're sitting in the two of them are in Miami jail. They just brought the father back from Colombia. They've been sitting in jail for 2 years. They took the father now and one of the sons to Texas jail, to the mental institution. Yeah. Exactly. So I didn't know if you wanted to do a story. They were supposed to have their court date September the 12th. The Grennans, you know the Mark Grennans?
Because of all the Americans detained without trial and so on and so on.
Well, this is another good...
I gotta pee.
So go ahead. It was for the dioxide.
I do know what's the dioxide. Matt? What do you mean this is about the chlorine dioxide?
That's why they arrested him. He's the one that told President Trump about it 2 years ago.
You mean hydroxychloroquine?
Yeah. And they, no, it's chlorine, it's the chlorine dioxide. Yes, it's been around for 30 years.